Chapter 350. With the disappearance of the magic eye ray, the battle was officially over. On one hand, Dake felt lucky, but on the other hand, he felt unsatisfied. It's gone just like that. He looked regretfully at the small group of black powder and raised his hand to press on the head of the shape-shifting monster. His fingertips touched it, and a trace of heat seeped into his skin. Dake was startled as he realized that the shape-shifting monster's outer shell was melting. After a while, the shape-shifting monster automatically deactivated its transformation state and softly laid on the ground. It was obvious that the magic eye ray had overclocked it. Although its magic power had not been depleted, it was already very tired. Dake suddenly realized that he had neglected the shape-shifting monster's state. He quickly bent down to carry it and gently caressed it. Busy, 1 second to remember. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. The shape-shifting monster cried out weakly, but its eyes secretly opened a slit. Previously, in order to strengthen its transformation, it specially studied the actor's self-cultivation. Although it did not recognize the words in the book, it did not matter as long as it knew the book's title. Immediately after, it was stored by Dake into the magic card. The Delu beast, who was walking over, could not help but smile meaningfully. After storing the shape-shifting monster into the magic card, Dake replenished its magic power while walking towards the small group of black powder. When he was in front of the black powder, he squatted down and took out a small bottle from his backpack, preparing to bottle the powder. After all, it was the strongest monster that he had hunted after entering the dungeon. Even if it was useless, it could be used as proof to increase his score in Professor Nini's heart. The final exam results would be converted into temporary credits and accumulated into the total score of each school. Based on the score, only the school with the highest score would have the opportunity to make a wish to the Holy Grail. Dake was still hoping to rely on the Holy Grail to increase the level of Underworld Spirit Spell, or Soul Loss Spell. Although individual credits were like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood, how could one progress 1,000 miles without taking small steps? He took out a glove from the side pocket of his backpack and put it on before reaching out to touch the black powder. After pinching a little bit, he found that the black powder was similar to a black crystal. It did not look like the residue of a demon at all. Suddenly, he frowned and stretched out his hand to wipe away the top layer of the black powder. Sure enough, he found a black crystal the size of a ping-pong ball. This black crystal had a hint of a core material. He carefully picked it up and observed it carefully. He found that it had a total of 18 sides, and each side was unexpectedly as flat as a mirror, full of the beauty of geometry. But what can this thing do? Dake couldn't help but frown. Maybe it can be used to make dice? Dake couldn't help but turn around when he heard the voice behind him. He saw AI Ma, who had mustered up her courage. After witnessing the disappearance of White and Luo Boat, AI Ma Métis screamed in horror. But after she calmed down, she realized that the two of them had only been teleported out of the underground city. The teleportation coordinates of the dungeon escape device were set next to the infirmary to facilitate Sister Kalien's timely treatment of the injured. The two of them were most likely there. Were they the first batch to be teleported out? They couldn't be the only batch, right? AI Ma came back to her senses and was immediately attracted by Dake's actions. Immediately after, she saw the round boulder being destroyed by the polymorph monster, so she carefully walked out of the tunnel. With Dake dimming around, she always felt an inexplicable sense of security. Walking behind Dake, AI Ma saw the 18-sided black crystal and casually mentioned it. However, this mouth gave Doc a reminder. 18-sided dice? Why do I feel like I've heard of it before? Dake thought carefully, but still couldn't figure it out. He put it aside and asked, "Are you okay?" AI Ma blushed and lowered her head. She whispered, "I'm fine." "That's good." Dake didn't ask any more. He had a rough idea of AI Ma's movements, so there was no need to ask now. In short, he took out a tool and swept the small pinch of black powder on the ground into a bottle. Then, he sealed the black crystal in a small palm-sized bag before standing up. At this time, Anna and Luo C walked over. The two girls saw AI Ma standing there in a daze, so they chatted with her. "So, you want to travel with us for the rest of the time?" Dake looked at AI Ma strangely. AI Ma was supposed to have a fiery personality, but at this time, she looked away and blushed. However, she still nodded her head ever so slightly. Dake looked at her for a while and suddenly said, "Suspension bridge effect, do you understand?" This sentence was actually a bit abrupt. After Emma heard this, she was indeed stunned for a moment. Then, she finally realized that she was wrong. She quickly adjusted her expression and raised her voice, "Suspension bridge effect, of course I understand." Anna was the only one who didn't understand. She couldn't help but interrupt, "What is the suspension bridge effect?" Luo Si quickly took her arm and whispered, "The suspension bridge effect means that when a person crosses a suspension bridge in fear, his or her heart will involuntarily beat faster. Then, he or she will have some thoughts that make his or her heart beat faster." Anna nodded as if she understood. "Oh." Then she looked at Emma with pity and said in an old-fashioned manner, "Poor child, you must be scared." Dake huffed. He couldn't help but laugh. AI Ma was so embarrassed that she clasped her fingers tightly. "You can travel with us. But a team can only have one leader. Do you understand what I mean?" Dake said to AI Ma. AI Ma immediately said, "Of course." She seemed very sincere. Anna and Luo Si didn't reject her joining. Dake nodded with satisfaction and said, "So, where do you want to go next?" AI Ma. "Ah? Didn't you say that there is only one leader?" Dake. "I don't have the final say here. Of course, I have to ask for the opinions of the team members." AI Ma. "That being said." But in fact, Dake just couldn't think of where to go at the moment. There was still a long time before evening. They definitely couldn't go back directly. And Greed 2, which made trash slimes evolve into greedy slimes, still needed some time to cool down. During this time, Dake didn't have a definite plan. "Anyway, let's take a break first." He waved his hand and rested on the spot. Whether it was AI Ma or Luo Si, in fact, they all needed some time to adjust their mentality. After the four people finished forming the team, they changed to another place to rest. Although AI Ma joined the team, she still seemed very reserved. Dake took the initiative to talk about the experience since the free activities. From the moment they left the entrance of the second floor of the underground city until now, about 2 hours had passed. In these 2 hours, Dake's biggest gains were the unknown rusted sword and the 18-sided black crystal. If they had to count, the bottle of black powder, the remains of the Demon Eyes corpse might be counted as one of the gains. In addition, their gains were mostly materials obtained from hunting ordinary monsters. Those materials could be used to make magic cards, but whether they could make a magic card that suited them in the end, more or less, required a bit of luck. As for the three-person team formed by AI Ma, White, and Luo Boat, after they left the entrance of the second floor, their behavior was generally similar to that of Dake's team. It was just that every time they encountered a monster, White would immediately summon the monster. Relying on the monster's strength and White's magic power, their journey was relatively smooth. After that, Emma began to talk about their adventures. In the maze type of underground city, there were usually many hidden mechanisms and rooms. Of course. Hidden room and hidden space, the difference of one word was huge. Hidden room was also called secret room. When AI Ma fumbled forward, she found a mural that was blocked by a Rot-Tan monster. She quickly called out to White and Luo Boat, who had already gone far, and summoned the magic elf to remove the Rot-Tan monster. Then she solved the riddle of the mural and opened a secret room hidden in the wall. What's in the secret room? AI Ma's writing skills were very strong. She narrated the story tirelessly, which was very captivating. Dake's team was curious. But AI Ma said dejectedly, "Nothing." She was very excited when she solved the riddle, especially when the door of the secret room slowly opened in front of her. She thought that she could find the hidden treasure in the secret room like the protagonists in the legends. But in fact, she didn't. There was only a lamp and a mural in the secret room. It was the same mural as the one on the wall outside. She took the ancient oil lamp from the platform in the middle of the secret room and left the secret room helplessly. Not long after, she encountered the hidden space where the abyss was. After listening to her story, Dake's eyes gradually became strange. In fact, everyone, including AI Ma, except Deanna, thought of a possibility. Dake couldn't help but ask, "Can you tell me what the two murals look like?" Of course. AI Ma was much happier when she talked about the results of her adventure. "I've recorded it, wait a moment." After that, she turned around, took her backpack, and looked for the notebook. Dake took the opportunity to take out the Dream Demon magic card and tapped on the surface of the card. Under the touch of his magic power, the Dream Demon squirmed like a little girl. After a while, AI Ma found the notebook. She flipped to the middle of the notebook and said with a smile, "Found it." Dake's team all went over. They saw that on the notebook, there was a well-defined totem drawn with thin lines. Although the totem was slightly distorted due to the painting style, if one looked carefully, one could see the shadow of a jellyfish on it. Under the mushroom-shaped body, there were dense straight lines, and only a corner was drawn at the bottom. Hum hum. Hum hum hum. Hum. If one didn't have a preconceived notion, it would be difficult to think that those straight lines were tentacles. Dake put up the Dream Demon magic card so that it could see the totem on the notebook. After the Dream Demon saw the totem, it tilted its head and thought for a while, and then nodded hard. "Looks like it." Dake pondered, "This totem is most likely the monster at the bottom of the abyss. From the looks of it, it's very likely that you triggered something in the secret room that activated this hidden space. It's just that we were closer than you at that time, so we entered earlier." "Is that so?" AI Ma frowned and thought carefully, "But we didn't do anything." Just when she was confused, Deanna suddenly interrupted, "But AI Ma, didn't you take out an oil lamp from inside?" AI Ma was surprised. "If it's an oil lamp, I just wanted to get something to commemorate it." "Well, it looks like it's an oil lamp." She closed the notebook, and her brows gradually relaxed. Then she put the notebook back into the backpack and took out the oil lamp from it. The oil lamp was sealed in a transparent bag. After she took out the oil lamp, she put it on her knees and hesitated. "This is just an ordinary oil lamp, right?" Dake couldn't help but roll his eyes. How could it be ordinary? AI Ma asked this. Maybe she just wanted to get the answer she wanted from others. Fortunately, Deanna supported her. "Of course it's a treasure. It's great." This was probably how the interactions between people were formed. AI Ma looked very happy, and she rubbed the side of the oil lamp with the bag between them. Of course, no matter how many times she rubbed, she couldn't summon Aladdin. Although this oil lamp looked a little like Aladdin's magic lamp, its copper paint was full of rust, and it was obviously an antique. But looking at this oil lamp, people couldn't help but think of another item. Dake lifted the rusted sword by his feet, and under AI Ma's curious gaze, he put it close to the oil lamp. A lamp, a sword. They didn't seem to be related. But when they were put together, they were found to be made of the same material. It's actually a set? Dake couldn't help but think. AI Ma obviously also noticed this, and she immediately said, "This is the treasure you found in the treasure chest?" Deanna nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Emma's thoughts began to run wild. After a while, she said, "I heard that some historical relics can always be found in the underground city of our school. If we read the historical documents, maybe we can find the origin of this oil lamp and this short sword. When we get out of the underground city, let's look for it together." Deanna, do you want to flip through the books? I'm not very good at flipping through books. Pa. Rose quickly patted the back of her hand and smiled. Of course you can. This is the reward of our first adventure. We must investigate it thoroughly. 4000/8000, chatting with my family for a few hours. The update is late. Next chapter. Morning. Chapter 351. They agreed to go to the library after leaving the dungeon, and then rested for another 15 minutes. It's almost time. Dake tied the short sword with a rope and hung it on the side of his backpack. Then, he passed the backpack to the Delu beast. Deanna came over and said with her cheeks full of snacks, "I can carry it too." The Delu beast coldly glanced at her. Then, it turned its head and snorted, shaking its backpack. "Don't forget to tidy up the snacks." Dake pointed at the trash beside Deanna and said with a smile, "Okay." Deanna answered obediently and prepared to tidy up the trash. But Luo Si had already started to tidy up. In the Shang Malian dungeon, these foreign objects would not be included in the dungeon's self-cleaning system. First website, https://m Vipkanshu. VIP even scavengers such as the luminous moss and vine monsters would not swallow non-organic trash. If the adventurers did not clean it up in time, the trash would be transported to a certain level of the dungeon and gradually pile up into a terrifying trash mountain. Every once in a while, the Academy would issue a task to the seniors to clean up the trash. Although this task usually had a huge reward that exceeded the difficulty of the task itself, there were still very few people who were willing to accept it. Therefore, for the students in the dungeon, developing a good habit of not littering was a good thing for the dungeon and the students. On the other hand, the Shang Malian did not have a moral education class, so they had to pay attention to some small habits. Normally, the nobles would hire a famous local lady to be their tutor and conduct moral education in this area. But Deanna and Luo Si did not receive such education. Even Luo Si had her own shortcomings in some areas, and she also had to be guided. After the four of them left the dungeon, they went straight to the secret room mentioned by AI Ma. For Dake and the other two, since there was such a secret room, they had to see it with their own eyes. But when they returned, they didn't find anything that looked like a mural on the wall. AI Ma looked at the corpse of the vine monster on the ground and frowned. "It should be here." Dake thought for a moment and said, "Then it must have disappeared with the disappearance of the hidden space." Then he said, "There's nothing we can do about it. Anyway, it's about time. Let's move on to the next treasure." AI Ma accepted his explanation and patted her cheeks to cheer herself up. Deanna was visibly excited when she heard that there was another treasure. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Are we going to start? Would he encounter another tentacle monster this time? Wah." As she spoke, she hugged Luo Si and began to tickle him. Luo Si giggled and started jostling with her. AI Ma could feel that the atmosphere was completely different from when he had teamed up with White and Luo Boat. He couldn't help but feel envious. Amidst the laughter, Dake took out Greed 2 from his card pack. He looked at the cooldown of Greed 2 and explained their treasure hunting method to AI Ma. Emma's eyes lit up as she listened, and her interest was gradually piqued. In the dungeon, aimless adventures and treasure hunting with a specific direction were two completely different concepts. Although she was the one who had triggered the hidden space not long ago, Dake and the other two were able to enter the hidden space because of that ordinary-looking slime. AI Ma had watched the competition and thought that the slime's biggest use was to hide in the hard shell of the kettlebug and act as a sacrifice for the summoning ritual. She didn't expect it to have such a precious use. Sure enough, Dake's magic guide elves have their own uses. His development of the magic guide elves is far better than ours. AI Ma thought in her heart and sighed slightly. Then, she encouraged herself in her heart and cheered herself on. Those who stood beside heroes could only be heroes. When the cooldown of Greed 2 was finally over, Dake held the trash slime in his palm and began to summon it. In the name of Dake Dim Eng, Magic Guide Summoning. Greed 2 released a faint blue light from the surface of the card. The trash slime was bathed in the blue light and twisted slightly, seeming to be enjoying it. Its body quickly expanded, and its original green body had a little more blue. Ouch! After evolving into Greed Eye, it suddenly bounced on Dake's palm. Dake quickly reached out and hugged it and said, "Hurry up." The Greed Slime's eyes suddenly became sharp. It squeezed out two small tentacles from its jelly-like body and knocked on its head. It was like small one when he was thinking. As its eyes closed and opened again, the Greed Slime activated treasure sniffing. After about 2 minutes of searching, it finally reacted. It stretched out its tentacles in a direction and nodded vigorously. Ouch! Let's go! After the previous experience, Dake and the other two were relatively calmer. They summoned their familiar and let it explore the surroundings. Then, they adjusted the direction and moved forward. AI Ma tried to blend in and also summoned his otter familiar and ordered it to follow behind and cover the rear. Of course, the demons of the underground city would not only appear from the front. There were also many demons that appeared from behind and used sneak attacks. The four-man team had a clear division of labor, and the command of the operation was very methodical. Once they encountered a demon, Dake would directly appoint a person to summon a certain magic guide elf. They would either hunt on the spot or lure the demon away. In short, they tried to shorten the time they stayed. The greed slime's evolution lasted for about 15 minutes. At least, they had to confirm the approximate location of the treasure during this time. Soon, 10 minutes had passed since they started walking. They basically did not collect the demons they hunted along the way. Finally, when the greed slime was about to degenerate, Vanguard Little Devil, who was flying in front, suddenly returned and gestured to convey a message. "There's someone in front?" Dake frowned and asked. Little Devil immediately nodded. "Was someone one step ahead of us?" Dake touched the greed slime in his arms and could not help but hesitate. "Anyway, let's go take a look first." The other three also expressed their agreement. Then, the four of them further increased their speed. After walking for a short distance, suddenly, there was a sudden noise in front of them. Dake raised his hand to the girls and signaled them to stop. He turned the corner and half of his face, carefully observing. With this, he relaxed a little. It was indeed people. And half of them were familiar people. Sorcerers Saraswati, Heidi Euphemia, and another girl from the Sorcerer's Academy that he was not familiar with. Nobles Teddy Dolan, Pitten, and another tall girl from the Nobles Academy. There was a total of 2 groups of people who somehow got together. But opposite them, there was a group of 3 people who looked like seniors at first glance. "It's the 3rd year?" Dake glanced at the style of their uniforms and immediately recognized their grades. "Speaking of which, it's Friday afternoon now. It's indeed the normal opening time of the dungeon." Dake muttered a few words in a low voice. He did not hide anymore and directly walked out from the corner. AI Ma, D. Anna, and Luo Si looked at each other and walked out as well. The appearance of the 4 of them immediately attracted the attention of the people who were quarreling over there. Dake did not care about their gazes. He only raised his head and looked at the huge iron door behind them. The iron door that was embedded in the brick was full of cracks. Even the door frame had traces of being twisted, and the edges were covered with rust. But the height of 15 to 16 meters and the thick texture of the door gave a very direct visual impact. In addition, there were 2 beast heads with pull rings on the door plank. On the left door plank, there was a bull head with a nose ring, and on the right door plank, there was a lion head with a nose ring. The traces of time were very obvious on the huge iron door protruding out. There was no doubt that there were precious treasures hidden behind it. Even if he did not ask, Dake could more or less guess that the 1st and 3rd year students had a conflict because of the treasure room. From a personal point of view, he naturally sided with the 1st year students. But from a fair point of view, there was always a need to talk about first come first serve. If there was no clear reasoning, then it would be troublesome. In the dungeon, everyone had their reasons. Since there was a conflict, there was only one way to resolve it. That was to have a duel on the spot. But to have a duel between a 1st year student and a 3rd year student? This was obviously unreliable. When Dake walked closer, Doran subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. He then waved his hand and said, "Dake, you're finally here." Although Doran usually restrained himself, when he really shouted, his voice was comparable to Luo Boat's. Perhaps this was what it meant to be hidden. Dake sighed slightly and said with a smile, "Sorry, something happened and I was delayed." It was true that something happened. It was also true that he was delayed. It was this, sorry. It was a simple way to cut in. Dark greeted Dolong and took the opportunity to cut in. Doran's eyes flashed and he complained, "Without you, even if we found this level boss, we wouldn't be able to defeat it." Level boss? Dake immediately understood. He turned slightly and swept his gaze across everyone's faces. He had a rough idea of what was going on. Since this iron door was where the level boss was, it was normal for the 3 third years to appear here. But from the looks of it, Doran and Sarah should have arrived first, then the 3 third year students. Otherwise, with the status of the third year students, it was impossible for them to argue with these two groups of first years. They did not directly chase Doran and the others away, most likely because they felt guilty. Dake naturally walked to Doran's side and asked with a puzzled expression, "These 3 seniors are?" Doran glanced at them and felt a little confident. He simply said, "I don't know, maybe they're passing by." The 3 saw that his tone and attitude were completely different from before and snorted coldly. One of the short boys wearing a green cotton hat pulled down his hat and muttered, "Fox borrowing the tiger's might." Although he muttered, his voice was not low. Doran's expression did not change. Because he was indeed a fox borrowing the tiger's might. Since he did so, he did not need to be afraid of being scolded. Doran was not that naive. This place was indeed discovered by them first. These 3 third-year students were latecomers. No matter what, he had a clear conscience. It was these 3 third-year students who kept saying that they had left their mark last weekend, but did not have time to deal with it, so they left it until this week. They even claimed that they were the first to arrive. But didn't the dungeon refresh every week? Could it be that the level boss did not refresh? Doran did not understand the rules of the dungeon thoroughly enough, so he could not help but hesitate. But Saraswati was very clear and explained it to him on the spot. It turned out that the dungeon's weekly refresh mechanism did not refresh everything. Under normal circumstances, when the number of monsters in a level reached a certain range, or when there were a certain number of monsters, the refresh mechanism would be triggered. Moreover, there was a high probability that the monsters here would not include some surviving elite monsters. The other situation was that the terrain of a level was too damaged, and the map would be reset. Or if the level's terrain was a maze, it would also be reset frequently. In addition, foreign species would not be included in the refresh mechanism, unless they were digested and absorbed by the dungeon's ecosystem. So the words of these 3 third-year students were not necessarily lies. No matter what, these 3 people clearly had some understanding of Dake dimming. Just now, before Dake arrived, they had already intensified to the point of arguing loudly. But now that Dake appeared, both sides obviously restrained themselves. Dake dimming. The red-haired youth among the 3 senior students looked at Dake and revealed a warm smile. This red-haired youth had a pair of very beautiful ruby eyes. When he smiled, it was as if the sun shone down, giving people a very strong sense of intimacy. What he wore on his chest was the tarot card emblem of the Fool's Academy. As for the short boy wearing a green cotton hat, the hair that peeked out from under his hat was obviously green. The remaining boy was slightly fat with an ordinary face. His hair color was similar to withered grass, giving the initial impression that he was malnourished. The emblem on their chests was also printed with the tarot card of the Fool. These 3 people were actually quite famous among the third-year students. The red-haired one was called Fonon. The green-haired one was called Grain. The yellow-haired one was called Hiero. They were known as the Red, Green, and Yellow Trio. Because they always appeared at the same time and their hair color was quite distinctive, they left a deep impression and unknowingly became famous. Although Dake had never heard of them, due to aristocratic etiquette, he still politely said, "Hello, may I know your name?" But the yellow-haired fatty of the Red, Green, and Yellow Trio did not seem to have a good temper. He immediately said, "There's no need to greet. Do you want to butt in?" Anna pouted and suddenly raised her foot, but was stopped by Luo C. 8000/8000 mission completed. Overtime punishment. Be punished with a blade. 0/8000 new mission has been activated. Not feeling well. Update later. Penguin group number 754102538. Prepare to subscribe to the group. Don't ask any more. _ Chapter 352. Yellow-haired Hiero had no idea that his foot had luckily escaped a disaster. It wasn't that his temper was so bad that he couldn't even accept a greeting, but he was well aware that if he went along with the other party's rhythm, with red-haired Fernandy's character, he would likely choose to back down. However, they did come today for the second floor's level boss, and their purpose was very simple. They wanted to kill the level boss to obtain core materials. The magic elf card that Fernandy was preparing to refine still lacked a high-quality horn, and there was a probability of obtaining it from that level boss. The academic pressure of the third year was much higher than that of the first year. Some professors would even issue a duel quota, requiring students to obtain a certain number of victories in duels within a limited time. If they couldn't reach the duel quota, their final evaluation would be lower. Although it wasn't common, Shangmalian Academy had a repeat-a-year system. Once the final exam results were low to a certain extent, they would need to take a makeup exam. If they couldn't pass the makeup exam, they would repeat a year. It was precisely because of the existence of this system that even the most stubborn students would try their best to maintain a minimum level of effort. Although the red, green, and yellow trio was somewhat famous, their results were very average. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. 6. Not all students of the House of Fools could be well prepared. They obviously fell into the category of not really. In the case of poor results, in order to complete the duel quota, they had to find a way to refine new magic cards to improve their strength. If they wanted to refine a new high-level magic card, of course, they would need high-quality core materials. The quality of the core materials dropped by the level boss was usually much higher than the same kind of monsters. If they could find its location and successfully kill it, it would be of great help to red-haired Fernandy's strength. In short, both sides had their own reasons. In the end, it was hard to say who came first. Previously, because Doran and the others were only first years, yellow-haired Hierro seemed to be very relaxed. Because he knew that even if these people really entered the treasure trove, they might not be able to successfully suppress the level boss. Hierro even considered letting this group of first years go first. When the first years were really in danger, they could also show the demeanor of a senior and rescue them. Unfortunately, Dake Dimming arrived. After recognizing this first-year student as an exception, Hierro realized that he had to quickly determine the nature of this matter. Let's duel. He did not beat around the bush and spoke directly. Dake wasn't angry at yellow-haired Hierro's pretense. He turned to look at Dolan and Sarah. Without knowing the details, Dake wouldn't simply make a decision for others. The reason why Yi Luo interfered was because he had a pretty good relationship with Dolong. A duel between a third year and a first year isn't too bad either. The aristocrat academy girl beside Dolong immediately sneered. However, she didn't look at Hierro. Instead, she stared at the red-haired Fanon, who was obviously thin-skinned. As expected, Fernandy became irritable. But the green-haired Jirian immediately said, "There's no age difference in duels. Seeing that you're only first years and don't know the rules, I'll forgive your inappropriate words." The girl from the aristocratic academy choked on the spot. After all, she was born as a young lady of a noble family and had no experience in quarreling. "We need some time." Saraswati spoke for the first time since Dake arrived. The red-haired Fernandy held it in for a long time before immediately saying, "No problem." For the two companions to make the atmosphere so stiff with just a few words, Fanon really admired them. He also knew that his personality was too soft, and with two companions around, they could complement each other. Thus, the first years retreated slightly, and the three groups gathered together. Dake finally had a chance to understand the whole situation. It turned out that Sarah's group was the first to discover this treasure vault. Dolan was a little slower and happened to arrive before the red, green, and yellow trio. Sarah's face was still filled with confidence. Her brown eyes and dark skin gave her a unique charm. "We were the first to discover this treasure vault. After that, we determined that there should be a tier boss inside. However, a tier boss is far stronger than a monster of the same level. We might not be a match for it, so we hesitated. Since Dolan and the others are here, we're ready to cooperate." Sarah smiled. Dolan complained, "It was originally a good thing. Even if we can't beat it, it can be considered an experience." I didn't expect that uninvited guests would come not long after we formed a team. Dake glanced at Dolan's expression and was sure that he counted the dungeon escape device as a key tool to gain experience. He couldn't help but feel sorry for Professor Nini. Who knew how many students still had the same thoughts? There shouldn't be many. After all, there weren't many people like Dolan who weren't afraid of death. Okay, the other party isn't that kind of unreasonable person, Sarah said. But I really didn't expect that the knowledge I just learned from Professor Cheong-si could be put to use so quickly. Dolan said, "Silent duel? Then aren't we bound to lose?" Sarah shook her head. "There's no such thing. The rules of the silent duel reduce the advantage of high-star magic elves to the limit. We have a chance." Dolan immediately looked at Dake. "Then we can only," Sarah said again. The other party only proposed a duel after seeing Dake arrive. "I think they're likely to avoid a one-on-one duel with Dake and make a request for a group duel." Dolan, "They're third-year students. Would they be so shameless?" Sarah was speechless. Dolan, don't always use your childish aristocratic thinking to think about problems. For most people, face can't be eaten. That's right. After all, you're not a traditional aristocrat and are easily deceived by the superficial environment. Even you aristocrats don't care about face. I'm not a child. Dolan was speechless. Sarah couldn't be bothered to look at him. Back to the topic. Suppose the other party proposes a 3-on-1 duel. We can refuse, but we need to continue arguing. We can also agree and let strength speak for itself. I'll say this first. I'm very interested in silent duels. Then, Dolan unconsciously looked at Dake. Dake said indifferently, "Sarah's words make sense. We don't have much time left. We still need time to crusade against the bosses. It's best to end it quickly. Moreover, it's the Academy's rule to use silent duels to resolve disputes in the underground city. The problem is that if the other party really wants to force a 3-on-1 duel, we're still missing one person." "Of course it's," Dolan said matter-of-factly. But before he could finish his sentence, two people spoke at the same time. "I'll do it. I can do it." Dolan turned his head and saw the silent AI Ma and the excited D. Anna. This made his expression stagnate. After experiencing the newcomers' competition, he had a relatively clear understanding of the strength of the students in the same grade. He knew that AI Ma and D. Anna were indeed stronger than him. In order to ensure the victory of the duel, he could only choose to give in at this time. He reluctantly closed his mouth. And AI Ma hesitated after seeing D. Anna speak. "Let's do D. Anna." AI Ma's gold beast should not have recovered to its best state. Dake observed the expressions of the two and said decisively. Sarah's mouth curved into a smile. "Then let's do it. The first duel in the underground city. I'm looking forward to it." Her expectations for this duel seemed to be higher than that of the bosses. Dake even suspected that she deliberately mentioned the 3-on-1 duel to prevent him from not having a chance to fight. After the discussion, Dake naturally stood in the center position. He took the initiative to walk out and said to the red, green, and yellow trio, "We agree to the duel, but according to the rules of the underground city, it must be a silent duel." "But we don't have a silence card." The red-haired Fanon said, "Don't worry, I have one." Dake asked, "Are you going to release the silence card?" Fanon said, "Yes. According to the rules, after I release the silence card, the duel will start after 10 seconds of silence." Dake smiled. "I thought you were going to be the referee." Fanon returned a smile. "Of course not. By the way, I heard you guys talking about a 3-on-1 duel. Actually, that's what we're thinking. Let's start right away." Dake immediately made a decision. "It seems that we've reached a consensus." Fanon said, "It seems so." The two sides quickly set up a battle array in front of the huge iron gate. There were generally two ways to duel with so many people. One was a one-on-one duel with many people, and the other was a cooperative duel with many people. Of course, Dake couldn't choose a cooperative duel. The red, green, and yellow trio looked like they had a tacit understanding of each other. If they fought a real 3-on-3 duel with them, the chances of winning would be extremely low. So, both sides took a step back. They agreed to send out 3 people, and the other side didn't force them to cooperate. Therefore, the current battle array was that each side sent out 3 people, with the Iron Gate as the dividing line, standing on 2 sides. Although the duels were held at the same time, they didn't interfere with each other, and the final victory would be decided by the number of winners. In other words, only 2 people could win. This was acceptable for the red, green, and yellow trio. They even thought of Tianji's horse racing, but in the end, they rejected it. Because the 3 of them weren't very different from each other, they really couldn't find a weak horse. And for Dake and the others, it wasn't a big problem. Sarah's thoughts were obviously different from Dake's. She didn't want to rely on Dake to win. So, she had to win this duel. Before the duel began, the first years summoned their familiars and ordered them to spread out and patrol the surroundings to be on guard. Under everyone's gaze, the 3-on-3 duel finally began with the activation of a silence card. Silent duel. The moment the voice disappeared, the 3 first years and 3 third years immediately began the countdown. Fortunately, the 3 first years had strong mental fortitude and didn't show any signs of nervousness. The 3 of them were very calm. Dake stood in the middle, with Saraswati on his left and Anna Gretbel on his right. It had been an hour since the trip to the abyss in the hidden space. The cooldown of Bliss 3 and Pride 3 in Dake's hands had ended. The magic cards that couldn't be used at the moment were Bliss 3, Moon, Pride 2, Old, Greed 2, and the magic fairy, Dream Demon, that hadn't recovered to its best state. In addition, the Diru beast wasn't kept in the magic card, so it couldn't participate in the duel for the time being. As for the little devil beast, it had been resealed in the spell cage card. 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1, 0. The moment the countdown ended, Dake immediately began to cast the usual summoning spell. According to the rules of the silent duel, the sorcerer had to summon a 1-star magic fairy to replace the magic ball. In some cases, the students would choose to summon a 1-star magic beast, which was also a rare opportunity for the magic beast to fight. Dake could do the same, and he had 2 magic beasts. But it was really unnecessary. Touching the spell cage card, Little Devil Beast, in his hand, Dake smiled. In fact, he was more inclined to choose the 3-person duel mode. But he had to give them a chance. No matter if it was here or there. Just 3 seconds after the countdown ended, the little devil beast that had been with him since he entered the school suddenly appeared in the light. There was no need to say more about the tacit understanding between the 2. After the little devil beast was summoned, it laughed silently and then suddenly flew into the sky. In order to prevent being killed by the opponent during the cooldown period of the summoning spell, it needed some time to detour. As long as it could survive these few seconds, everything would come to an end. The little demonic beast was always immersed in his self-directed comedy. After it flew into the air, it immediately looked at the third-year student less than 10 meters away, the red-haired Fernandi. Fernandi was the core of the red, green, and yellow trio, but he could become the core mainly because his personality just happened to be the link to connect the other 2. And his strength was only slightly higher than them. Fernandi had experience in silent duels. This could be seen from the silence card he carried with him. His first move was also not a magic beast, but another 1-star magic fairy with special life-saving abilities, Red Imp. Fernandi, Jirian, and Hiero were good friends who knew each other from before they entered the school. The 3 were also assigned to the Fool's Yard. When they first learned the basic refining method of the magic fairy, the 3 chose the exact same materials, but the final refining results were different. Almost at the same time, in front of the red, green, and yellow trio, 3 magic fairies of different colors appeared. Red Imp, Green Imp, Yellow Imp. These 3 1-star magic fairies of the fairy species were of the fire attribute, the grass attribute, and the ground attribute respectively. Their 3 attributes were very average, the standard 250, higher than the magic beast which was basically 100. And each little imp had a very practical sure kill skill. While waiting for the cooldown of the summoning spell, Dake even had the leisure to observe the scene. Although Sarah and Anna's summoning time was considered extremely fast among the first years, it was far from the 3-second limit, not to mention that they still needed to cast the spell silently, so it seemed even slower. After all, the red, yellow, and green trio were third-year students. Although they didn't reach the 3-second limit, they were very close. However, this difference of a few seconds was already made up for when they summoned the 1-star magic fairy. When the 3 little imps moved, Sarah and Anna finally summoned their magic fairies. Sarah summoned her magic beast, Bennu Bird. The Bennu Bird with the sure kill skill, Soul Attraction, basically didn't have much combat power, but it could fly. Being able to fly was a huge advantage. It could allow the magic beast to dodge a large portion of the attacks. Anna also summoned Magic Beast, Polar Bear. Although the polar bear with a magic attack and defense of 200 looked very majestic, it was actually only at the level of an ordinary polar bear. However, its sure kill skill, Ice Resistance Ring, was a useful skill. Facing an unfamiliar domain, the two of them chose to focus on defense at the beginning of the duel and didn't take the initiative to attack. On the other hand, the red, yellow, and green imps had already made their move. Red-haired Fanon's red imp suddenly curled itself into a ball. The flames that shot up from its back suddenly spread and enveloped its entire body in an instant, forming a huge fireball. The fireball burned fiercely, but the red imp's body gradually disappeared in the flames. In the end, it completely disappeared. It was extremely strange. Fanon looked at the red imp's successful release of its sure kill skill, and a trace of confidence appeared in his eyes. Because of his personality, he was pushed out to deal with the most troublesome Dake Dimming. He was originally in the position of being sacrificed. But as a third-year student, of course, he wouldn't be willing to give up just like that. If he found an opportunity, he wouldn't hesitate to attack. The cooldown of the summoning skills of both sides quickly passed. Fanon didn't hesitate to start the second normal summoning. He found that Dake's summoning speed seemed to be faster than his. But fortunately, the difference wasn't big. As long as the 1-star magic guide spirit that Dake summoned wasn't a fast attack type, he would have enough time to summon his second magic guide spirit. The real duel would begin from that moment. In the domain of the 3-star magic guide spirit, he had full confidence. Once successfully summoned, his 3-star magic guide spirit would immediately use a wide area sure kill skill with a huge range and carry out a destructive attack on the opponent. At that time, as long as the second magic guide spirit summoned by Dake couldn't bring the 1-star magic guide spirit into its protection range, it wouldn't be able to escape the fate of defeat. The difference between the third and first years is experience and knowledge. Your professor must not have told you how stupid it is to let the 1-star magic guide spirit that replaces the magic guide ball fly too high. Fanon suddenly raised the 3-star magic guide spirit card in his hand. Magic Guide Summon. In an instant, light shone. The dark golden light blinded Fanon's eyes. When Fanon's 3-star magic guide spirit jumped out of the card, the little demon beast opposite him was already wrapped in a dark golden light. Bathed in the light of pride, the little demon beast couldn't stop laughing wildly. It suddenly realized that there were benefits to being covered by this silence card. If it laughed wildly like this normally, it would definitely be taught a lesson by its master. But under the cover of the silence card, no matter how it laughed, it wouldn't affect others. Even if it cursed and swore to its heart's content, it wouldn't be discovered. It was simply a sharp weapon to vent pressure. The little demon beast's heart also expanded along with its body's rapid expansion. When it became tall and strong, it also successfully completed the change from a humble little demon to a mental giant. The demon beast that emitted an overwhelming aura suddenly spread its wings, opened its hands, and roared to its heart's content. The power of darkness overflowed from the surface of its body and wrapped around its body. Red-haired Fanon's expression suddenly changed. "You cheated." In his anger, Fanon's cheeks suddenly flushed red. He raised his hand and pointed at Dake, berating angrily. But under the coverage of the silence card, his trash talk couldn't make a sound at all. Of course, even if it reached Dake's ears, he would only smile and not say anything. Then, he would throw this superficial accusation to the back of his mind. From the moment he learned the rules of the silent duel, Dake clearly realized that this duel method was tailor-made for him. What was the best way to protect a 1-star magic guide spirit? Wouldn't it be fine to turn it into a 4-star magic guide spirit? When Fernand confidently summoned a 3-star magic guide spirit, Dake had already turned the 1-star magic guide spirit that needed to be protected into a 4-star magic guide spirit. After that, the 4-star magic guide elf directly used instant teleportation and appeared in front of Fernand. Fernand didn't even have time to retract his outstretched finger. The demon beast's tall body reached his finger. Without any sound or presence, the demon beast bent down and gently clamped his finger with its sharp claws, then pushed him back and put him down. Fernand suddenly staggered and subconsciously took 2 steps back. But the demon beast's shadow still enveloped him. The 3-star magic guide spirit that Fernand summoned, a red-skinned lion with a mane that fluttered like flames, suddenly turned around and bared its fangs at the demon beast after realizing that its master was threatened. After the demon beast smelled the sulfur smell emitted by this flaming lion, it turned around slightly. At the same time, the corners of its mouth rose. It raised its right arm and suddenly expanded. That arm with huge sharp claws was like a python coming out of its hole. It instantly lengthened and actually directly grabbed the flaming lion's neck. The flaming lion's mane was really burning. But the demon beast's arm was wrapped with a powerful dark power, easily blocking this flame that could not even be considered a sure kill skill. The flaming lion still wanted to struggle, but the demon beast's claws exerted force and suddenly lifted its neck, hanging it in the air. The fierce flaming lion was like an old dog at this moment. It could only struggle desperately and use its front claws to pull the demon beast's arm. However, in this state, it could not exert any strength at all. It was also difficult to release the area of effect sure kill skill that was brewing. The demonic beast exerted a bit more force and broke its neck. Of course, the magic guide spirit would not die so easily, but the demon beast had already lost interest in it. It casually threw it out and strode towards the fireball that the red imp had turned into. The fireball seemed to have taken root in the ground and was still burning. The demon beast walked over in an ordinary manner and then stepped on the fireball. Then, the fireball was extinguished in an ordinary manner. The demon beast raised its foot and took a step back. At the place where the fire was extinguished, a red imp curled up into a ball gradually appeared. It carefully poked its head out, and as soon as it saw the tall and powerful demon beast, it suddenly screamed. The demon beast's ferocious and proud face made the timid red imp tremble. It struggled to get up and tried to escape, but the demon beast raised its foot again and stepped on it. The red imp turned into a spark of magic power under his feet. Only then did a rain of fire fall from above. He reached out and grabbed one of the burning stones as if it was a snowflake. He put it in his mouth and bit it. Then, he spat it out. Dake was surprised by the demon beast's strange actions and could not help but cover his eyes. He kept feeling that after the little demon evolved, its brain was even more abnormal. Was it really human to put the opponent's ultimate skill in its mouth like a walnut and bite it? And according to the plan that they had formulated beforehand, the little demon beast should have directly used instant teleport, after evolving and stomped the red imp to death with 2 feet to obtain a clean victory. But in fact, it had done too many unnecessary actions. What gave it the courage to do so? Was it the level 3 pride that made its brain go haywire? Or was it the special environment under the silence card that made it free? Did it not know what it meant to settle accounts after the autumn? Dake was really speechless, so he simply turned his head to watch the duel between the 2 sides. When the dust settled on this side of the duel, Anna and Sarah's duel was also coming to an end. Anna's opponent was the green-haired Jirian. After Jirian's green imp was summoned, it planted a seed on top of its head. As the green seed sprouted, its body disappeared from sight at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was actually some kind of stealth ultimate skill. Not only did the invisible green imp not hide on the spot, but it also sneaked towards Anna's polar bear. Phantasmal beasts had a very unique aura, and those who were familiar with it could easily distinguish it. Grimm had obviously recognized it. He used hand gestures to command and adjusted his strategy in time, and the green imp began to move. Phantasmal beasts were very weak under normal circumstances, and theoretically, they were no match for the green imp. At the same time, he began to summon his second enchanted elf. It was a 3-star insect species, the green winged mantis. After the green winged mantis appeared, it waved its hand, and as a gust of wind wrapped around it, its body became invisible just like the green imp. Immediately after that, the invisible green winged mantis followed the green imp's footsteps and sneaked towards it. In an environment without sound, the invisible imp moved silently, and it could be said to be perfect stealth. Anna was unusually shocked by this. It was the first time she encountered an opponent that could become invisible, and her card bag did not have any concealment-breaking cards like the reveal powder. If it was under normal circumstances, she could still distinguish the direction by listening. However, under the silence card, her sharp hearing also lost its function. Anna's sense of smell was not that good yet. What was even more difficult was that she did not expect to encounter such a situation, so she did not communicate with her enchanted elf beforehand. If she relied on her enchanted elf to perform on its own, Anna instantly became nervous. Her finger swiped across the side of the enchanted cards arranged in the card bag, and she had no choice but to summon the 3-star enchanted elf, the spirit bear. However, as soon as the summoning of the spirit bear was completed, the phantasmal beast, polar bear, suddenly stood up, and its thick bare paw slammed towards its own chest. In an instant, cold air filled the air. A ring of condensed ice bloomed with it as the center. The green imp, that had sneaked half a meter away from the spirit bear, was stopped in its tracks by the ice ring of resistance. Then, there was a sudden burst of force, and it was pushed out. The green bud on top of the green imp's head quickly withered, and its body was forced to reveal itself. However, the invisible green winged mantis had already launched a surprise attack, and its slender and sharp blade instantly slashed towards the spirit bear. A gust of wind blew by, and the polar bear's skin was split open. However, the spirit bear that descended from the sky pressed down hard, and forced the green winged mantis to change its direction. The polar bear was lucky to survive, but its magic was almost depleted, and it was as weak as a piece of skin. However, the green winged mantis still did not reveal itself. It did not actually slash with its blade, or else its invisibility would have been removed after the attack. Anna chose to summon the spirit bear in the air in front of the polar bear at the crucial moment, and she was lucky enough to escape the attack. However, facing an invisible opponent, it was still difficult for her to turn the situation around. Her defeat seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Dake turned to Sarah's side. Saraswati's opponent was the yellow-haired Hierro. The yellow-haired Hierro's yellow imp actually mastered a rare sure-kill skill, digging hole. The digging hole skill was a sure-kill skill with a ground attribute, and it could separate the soil and drill into the ground. The only drawback was that it consumed a lot of magic. The more magic, the faster and deeper the digging. On the contrary, if the magic was only used a little, there would be bulging marks on the ground. The yellow imp used digging hole to hide as soon as it appeared. Then, the yellow-haired Hierro summoned a big yellow snake, and it spat out clumps of soil at the Bennu bird in the sky, trying to shoot it down from the sky. However, the Bennu bird seemed to have spiritual awareness, and it was always able to avoid the soil shot. This gave Sarah a chance to fight back. Under everyone's gaze, she summoned a magic elf that Dake had never seen before. 8000/8000 ding. Your quest has been completed, and a new quest has been triggered. 0/8000. Chapter 353. As the black mist rose, a thick and long cobra rushed out. Its body was even larger than the yellow-haired Hierro's khaki-colored snake. Dake observed carefully and was surprised to see that the cobra's head seemed to have pale white bones. The patterns on the skin folds on its neck were like the face of a woman with heavy makeup. It was full of charm and at the same time rendered an extremely horrifying feeling. As it came out of the black fog, the horrifying feeling suddenly increased. There was no flesh 3 inches below the skin folds on its neck. The pale white bones drilled out of the flesh all the way to its tail. The smell of decay mixed with blood rushed straight to his face. This terrifying, skeletal beauty snake, didn't stop at all after it appeared on the stage. Its speed was extremely fast. The lower half of its body, which only had bones, came out of the black fog and fiercely whipped the ground. When it approached the khaki-colored snake, the woman with heavy makeup on the skin folds on its neck suddenly revealed a sinister smile. Then it actually came out of the skin folds. It was as if it had broken out of the skeleton snake's body. The beautiful woman laughed silently and rushed toward the khaki-colored snake's body like a ghost. With a bend, she passed through its body and came out from the other side. The khaki-colored snake that had been spraying mud into the sky just now froze in place for a moment. Remember, https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. Then, it began to tremble. The beautiful woman's soul passed through its body again. After a few times, it was as if it was frozen and stood in place. Seeing this, the expression of the yellow-haired Hierro changed slightly, and he summoned a second magic guide fairy in a second. Because the one-star magic guide spirit he summoned at the beginning couldn't be used as a sacrifice for a sacrificial summoning, he needed another magic guide spirit to summon a second-tier magic guide spirit. Although Silent Duels paid attention to a short and fast rhythm, if this rhythm couldn't be set, finding a way to summon a high-star magic guide spirit was also an option. Hierro pointed the magic guide card at the field. The magic guide spirit in the card turned into light and landed on the ground. It was actually a long snake. Hierro seemed to be very fond of snakes. The first two magic guide fairies he had summoned were both snakes. However, the second one was slightly smaller and was only a 2-star magic guide fairy. However, its body shape was very special. Its scales were as smooth as mirrors, and its body was slender and enchanting. On its neck was a leather pouch that looked like a sachet. A sweet aroma emanated from the leather bag. After a slight pause, this 2-star long snake opened its mouth and let out a long hiss. Although there was no sound, the leather pouch under its neck opened a little, and a faint smoke came out of it and spread in all directions. If he could make a sound, Sarah would definitely remind her elfin not to inhale. However, this was clearly not the time to do so. After the skeleton beauty snake absorbed the smoke, it actually gave up on the yellow snake and turned around to pounce on the 2-star snake on this side. However, although the skeletal beauty snake's body was seduced, the soul of a luring woman that came out of the skin folds on its neck was still entangled around the khaki snake. It was as if it was being haunted, making it unable to move. The skeleton beauty snake split into two just like that, and its main body fiercely crashed into the 2-star long snake. However, the smooth scales of the 2-star long snake refracted a light mirror that was 2 meters long and wide, blocking the skeleton beauty snake's impact. Even though the light mirror was shattered, the skeletal beauty snake's body was still stunned by the reflected power and remained in place. For a moment, the magic guide fairies on both sides stopped. The outcome of a duel often depended on this change of thought. In the current situation, although Sarah had one less magic guide fairy, she clearly had the advantage. On the contrary, Hierro, who had summoned an extra magic guide fairy, was at a disadvantage. However, once Hierro summoned the second-tier magic guide fairy, he would most likely be able to reverse the situation in an instant. It was a pity that his intentions were too obvious. As a result, Sarah easily noticed it and immediately began to summon the Sphinx cat. As the familiar black cat was summoned, Dake, as a bystander who had activated God's view, already had a judgment of the outcome of this duel. And as expected, the Sphinx cat quickly ran in front of the khaki-colored snake that was haunted, and stepped on its shadow. The Sphinx cat's golden eyes suddenly lit up. Sure kill skill. Shadow stomp. After the 3-star snake's shadow was nailed, the outline of its body was also completely nailed. It was already stiff because of haunted, and now it was completely unable to move. However, yellow-haired Hierro had yet to realize the crux of the problem. He looked at his magic guide fairy that was locked there, and his expression was still relaxed. The sacrificial summoning spell that he was casting did not stop at all. Perhaps in his logic, even if the 3-star snake was controlled by a sure-kill skill, it would not prevent him from offering it as a sacrifice. Sarah's Sphinx cat was indeed effective when taken by surprise. When Hierro successfully activated the sacrificial summoning spell, and prepared to offer the 3-star snake and 2-star snake as sacrifices, he discovered that the 3-star snake was forcibly suppressed by the Sphinx cat's power while it was being sacrificed. The sacrificial summoning failed because of this. Sarah was not going to let it go. She immediately injected magic power into the skeletal snake beauty magic card in her hand. She used this method to stimulate the skeletal snake beauty, reminding it that it was time to move. The original body of the skeletal snake beauty, which was stunned in place, shook its head violently twice and finally remembered that it still had a mission. Its eyes gradually became sharp. At the moment when Hiero was stunned by the failure of the sacrificial summoning, it used its bony tail to fiercely slap the 2-star snake in front of it. Then it accelerated rapidly and pounced on the yellow imp hiding underground. How to deal with a magic guide fairy hiding underground? There were many answers. However, the skeletal snake beauty used the most clumsy method. It stuck its head out, clamped the skin on its neck, contracted its bones, and drilled into the cave. Although the yellow imp had a godly skill like digging hole, its magic power was not enough to support it to dig too deep. Therefore, after only a few seconds, it was bitten to death by the skeletal snake beauty in the cave. At this point, the outcome of the duel had been decided. Red-haired Fernandi, who was nervously looking over there, suddenly lost his strength. If his failure was an expected sacrifice, then yellow-haired Hiero's failure was completely unexpected. But a loss was a loss. As third-year students, they could not go back on their words. Let's end it here. Fernandi took out the silence card, and turned to look at his last companion, Jirian. Whether Jirian won or not, it would not affect the overall situation. If there were no problems, he was ready to directly remove the ban and quickly leave. After losing to a first-year student, he could no longer shamelessly stay here. But as soon as he turned his head, he happened to see his green-haired companion with a worried face. He looked at the field again. The old bear condensed from light had actually put Anna's magical beast, Polar Bear, on its shoulder. The spirit bear, which was taller than a 2-story building when it stood upright, was slowly strolling in the field. It looked very leisurely, like a farmer patrolling the farm. But if one looked carefully, they would find that every step it took was stepping on the head of the green little ghost. The green little ghost ran and jumped, completely being played with in the palm of its hand. As for the green winged mantis, it had been slapped to death by the spirit bear. Yay! The moment Fernandi removed the silence card, Anna's cheers rang out. The spirit bear's performance surprised her. Without the command of its master, the old spirit bear actually relied on its own spirituality to carry the little bear in its eyes, and then used it as bait to lure the green winged mantis out. While the green winged mantis was unable to turn around in the air, the bear's millstone-sized paw came down and smashed it down. Anna blessed it with strength of the bear in time, causing its attack to skyrocket by 900 points. With just one paw, the green winged mantis was smashed into a mantis pie. The duel after that became the spirit bear's entertainment time. At #yen%%. The voice that suddenly recovered covered the foul language of the demon beast. The first-year students all gathered around excitedly. The result of the 3 of them winning was unexpected. But it was even more exciting. Anna skipped in front of Dake, stopped in her tracks, and looked up at him. Dake couldn't help but reach out and pinch her cheek, and Anna chuckled. Sarah reached out and waved her hand, keeping the magic elf back into the card, and walked over quickly. She looked like she hadn't had enough, and seemed to be quite dissatisfied with the third-year student opposite her. Is this the third-year student? How ridiculous. Although the voice was low, it still spread out. The yellow-haired Hiero clenched his teeth, but Fernandi reached out and pressed his shoulder in time, making him regain his composure. Let's go, Fernandi said in a low voice. The green-haired Jirian also walked over and said helplessly, a loss is a loss, they're very strong. Hiero was indignant. If it's an official duel, Fernandi said, there will always be a chance to meet them. When the time comes, we can't underestimate them. Hiero lowered his head. When the time comes. On the other side, after Dake said a few words to the people around him, he walked in the direction of the red, green, and yellow trio. He maintained appropriate politeness and said to Fernandi, who had the best impression of him, "Senior, since the result of the duel is out, then the boss of the second floor belongs to us?" Fernandi sighed. He really couldn't get angry with this junior who was full of noble demeanor. He immediately said, "The boss inside should be a two-headed demon with an ox head and a lion head. The ox head has endless strength, and the lion head can roar and repel the enemy. You guys be careful." Dake was startled. He didn't expect this senior to be so kind. He couldn't help but say again, "Thank you for telling me. May I know senior's name?" Fernandi waved his hand. "Just call me Fernandi." Then he said goodbye and quickly left with his other two companions. It was clean and tidy. After the three people left, Doran came over and said, "They don't look like bad people." Dake shook his head. "How can there be so many bad people?" Then he turned to all the students present and said, "Just now, that Senior Fernandi said something. The boss behind the iron gate was a type of two-headed devil. It has two heads. One is an ox head. Its main strength. It should have a sure kill skill that increases its strength. But if that's the case, then there's no need to worry. We need to pay attention to its other head, the lion head. The lion head can roar and repel the enemy. It's most likely an area control skill. After you enter, pay attention to protect yourselves. It's best to stay away from the boss." He was very detailed. Some people even suspected that Fernandi said a few words to him. Remember all of it? Seeing that some people were distracted, Dake immediately increased his tone. Although he was a latecomer, at this moment he was clearly the core of the team. The two girls who were distracted quickly calmed down. Doc glanced at them and said, "Since we've decided to challenge a tier boss, we should be careful about it." Professor Nini said more than once that the boss and the monsters of the same level are two completely different levels. If you don't want to trigger the dungeon escape device and go to the infirmary with those two, it's best to be alert. "Those two? Who are they?" Saraswati suddenly asked. Dake realized that he had let it slip, but his expression didn't change. "You don't need to worry about that. Get ready to open the door." The demon beast's evolution duration was only about 10 minutes. If they wanted to rely on its power when fighting the boss, they couldn't delay it any longer. But his skill at changing the topic was clearly not up to standard. Sarah's group and Doran's group only glanced at the AI Ma who appeared alone and suddenly understood. However, after whispering to each other, they became more cautious. Professor Nini's leadership was too confusing. It always made people feel that the dungeon was just so-so. Those dangerous monsters that appeared in the classroom also didn't appear. It almost made people think that this was a real spring outing. 1 minute later, 3 groups of 10 people each summoned at least one magic guide elf and came in front of the iron door. Dake asked the Diru beast to put the backpack on the wall and took a step forward. Then he waved his hand and asked the demon beast and the spirit bear to push the door together. The iron door of the treasury didn't have a key. If they wanted to enter, they would have to push the heavy iron door open. The demon beast went forward to try, but it couldn't push the door open by itself. Roar! The spirit bear patted its chest and strode forward. The spirit bear's basic attack was 1700. With the buff from bear's strength, it was forcefully raised to 2,600 points. It had already surpassed a 5-star magic guide elf and reached the level of a 6-star magic guide elf. With the 2 magic guide elves working together, the heavy iron door finally moved. As the iron door on one side was pushed open, light shone into the room. The 2-headed demon sitting on the throne suddenly opened its eyes. 4,000/8,000. Chapter 354. Every boss in the Shang-Molian underground city was not born without roots. They were all manifestations of history, leaving behind a thick and heavy stroke in the wheel of time. Taran Leon Kane Sartre had no idea what his past had been like. But the instinct to fight was still lurking in every cell in his body. When he sat on the pale throne made of bones, he would occasionally hear the horns and sounds of fighting on the battlefield. Broken memories entangled his heart, making him fall into eternal darkness in his memories. until the iron door of the treasury was pushed open. The white light that shone through the crack of the door made him feel disgusted. But when the sense of disgust rose, more memories leaked out from the crack. It was the season of the scorching sun, a city shrouded in black fog. The roars of demons and the low growls of the undead raged on the battlefield as the black fog spread. Blood, sacrifice, slaughter. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. When darkness covered the sky, the world would never be able to see daylight. The glory of the demons would sweep across the continent. Conquer, conquer, conquer. The ox head named Talon and the lion head named Leon suddenly opened their eyes under the stimulation of the white light. The ox head's eyes were as red as blood, filled with madness and killing intent. The lion head's eyes were as brilliant as gold, containing reason and pressure. The two-headed demon known as Talon Leon Kainsart was sitting on a throne made of bones. His blood-stained dark red axe leaned against his side as he quietly waited for the arrival of the uninvited guest. 10 first-year students passed through the crack of the door. Behind the iron door was an ancient and glorious hall. The empty space, more than 20 meters high, made the young students feel as if they had entered a kingdom of giants. The pillars standing in the hall were thicker than several people hugging together, and the walls exuding a stale smell were left with blurry murals. Although their value was greatly reduced because they were too dilapidated, if one studied them carefully, they might still be able to taste the lingering charm of history. After entering, A.I. Ma Métis was attracted by the murals carved all over the walls. She couldn't help but think of the set of murals that she had recorded with Dake. The mystery of the murals was still unsolved, and it was still the link between her and him. Saraswati, on the other hand, did not say a word. As the daughter of the wise one of the ancients, she had seen too many similar things. Ruins that were not rare enough could not arouse her curiosity. However, most of the students were still carefully hiding behind their magic elves as they watched the commotion around them. Dake took the lead, and Demon Beast took the lead. The moment he stepped through the iron gate, he felt as if he had stepped through endless time. The white light that shone through the crack in the door drove the darkness of the palace forward. Half of the hall was illuminated. This treasury was much more spacious than he had imagined. In the depths where the light could not reach, it was still pitch black. When one's gaze fell upon it, it was as if they were about to be devoured by the darkness. A faint sense of terror lingered in their hearts. Demon Beast. Hearing the order, the demonic beast nodded slightly and immediately rushed forward. As a perpetual scout, the evil demon beast's instant teleportation allowed it to escape from danger at the fastest speed and return quickly. Sneaking into the darkness was like a fish in water to it. Dake stopped in his tracks and blocked the students who wanted to continue forward. He had limited knowledge of the students other than D. Anna and Luo C., and he could not make reasonable adjustments based on their card sets in a short time. However, what they were about to face was only a level boss from the second level of the underground city. Under normal circumstances, a level boss would not exceed the second tier. That was the highest level boss would be a level 6 star. Even though tier bosses could obtain an endless supply of power from the dungeon, their basic attributes were much higher than ordinary magic elves, especially their mana, which represented life, was shockingly abundant. However, as long as it was within the range of the second tier, there would not be any fundamental changes. Dake thought of a way to deal with it and kept his brain active. However, a moment later, his expression changed drastically. A stream of light flew out from the darkness and entered the magic card in his hand. Demon Beast, dead. In just one exchange, the demon beast had died on the spot before it could even make a sound. Dake did not even have time to insert magic power to ask what happened. He saw a strong bloody light explode from the darkness. In an instant, the darkness was dispelled, and the crimson bloody light lit up half of the palace. It was like a sword, spear, sword, and halberd. The killing intent of the golden spear shot up to the sky. The 3-meter-tall two-headed demon was still sitting on the skeleton throne. However, the giant axe that was leaning on the side of the throne was lifted up by one of its hands and pointed straight ahead. The dark power on the blade of the axe was quickly absorbed, causing the bloody light on the surface of the axe to become even stronger. It slammed its giant axe down, and the sound of metal clashing spread out. As the sound wave spread, the strong killing intent also burst out in an instant. It was almost visible to the naked eye as it radiated outwards, passing through the bodies of the little magisters. Ah! The 4 students in Sarah's group and Doran's group turned pale instantly. Among them, the girl from the School of Magic, who was still full of curiosity, held her head and trembled as she screamed. Her screams of fear caused the atmosphere to drop to the freezing point. The girl from Doran's group could not help but feel scared. Ah! A second later, the little fatty Pit-Tan also screamed. However, when he let out his hoarse voice, the girl from Sarah's group stopped screaming. Although the other little magisters were so nervous that their foreheads were sweating, they forced themselves to endure. After all, the Shang Malian students were not ordinary people. They resisted the terrifying killing intent. If an ordinary person was here, they would have been paralyzed on the spot. Even so, the little magisters' hearts were still imprinted with fear. This is a tier boss? Dake's forehead was covered in sweat. The 2-headed demon's aura was even stronger than the vampire Vlad's. Even the demonic dragon they encountered in the secret passage did not have this kind of aura. Not to mention the vampire count that Vlad summoned. If there was one that could compare, it would be the moon god that had revived in the moon god temple. However, the pressure it gave off was completely different from the moon god's. And this was only a tier boss from the 2nd floor of the underground city. Is it really only a tier 2 boss? Dake softly called out. The Diru beast had already walked in front of him and was fully focused on the 2-headed demon on the skeleton throne. It was able to instantly kill the demon beast. It should have used the power increase method that Senior Fanon mentioned. Its attack power must have exceeded 4,000 points. And to be able to stop the demon beast from teleporting, it probably has a skill that can instantly control it. I just don't know if it has already entered cooldown. Also, I need to pay attention to its giant axe. While he was deep in thought, Doc abruptly focused his attention and shouted, "Get ready, it's about to rise." The demon beast's instant death aroused Dake's fighting spirit. He moved his fingers and pinched 2 magic cards between the joints of his index and middle fingers. After his reminder, the rest of the students immediately got ready. AI Ma summoned the gold coin bug. A giant orange bear appeared beside Anna, and Sarah had a secret ritual card in her hand. Even Luo Si summoned the Mobius bug. At this moment, the 2-headed demon stood up from the throne. Its body was robust and broad, and the muscles on its arms were as hard as rocks. Its whole body was covered with thick and long fur, and it only had clothes below its waist. The bull and lion heads on its neck were even more terrifying. Although it didn't have any armor, the 2-headed demon's body was covered with scars, which were obviously the symbol of its achievements. After getting up, the eyes of the 2-headed demon's bull head emitted a scarlet bloodlight. Conquer! It let out a deep roar, and its tyrannical aura became even more berserk. The bloodlight that flowed out from the bottom of its eyes spread all the way to its shoulder and wrapped around its right arm. It fused with the dark red giant axe like fresh blood. The totem emitted a blood mist. Its right arm swelled and thickened at a speed visible to the naked eye, and its strength skyrocketed. Perhaps it was the accumulated power of this arm that had instantly killed the evil devil beast. After completing a new round of accumulating power, the 2-headed demon held the giant axe upside down and stepped forward. Its legs didn't move quickly, but each step was extremely wide. After 2 or 3 steps, it suddenly started to run, and in a short moment, it crossed half of the hall. Then, it leapt up and swung the giant axe with its right arm, smashing it fiercely into the crowd. There was no unnecessary prelude, and this level of boss didn't even have the usual opening speech. There was only killing in its eyes. But the little mages who were prepared in advance scattered at Dake's shout. When the 2-headed demon descended from the sky, there was only one person left under its shadow. Dake Dimming didn't scatter. He raised his head and looked at the 2-headed demon that was descending rapidly, and his eyes were terrifyingly calm. He didn't know when it started, but he no longer panicked at this level of danger. Meow meow. There were two cats standing on either side of him. On the left was the grey Meow Meow, and on the right was the white diluted beast. The diluted beast had a calm expression, ready to attack. Meow Meow was clearly eager to give it a try. It's time. The two-headed ogre began to descend. Dake calmly said, "Meow meow, stellar transposition." As soon as his voice fell, he and the diluted beast retreated, leaving Meow Meow to face the terrifying two-headed ogre alone. Meow. Meow Meow's cry was unprecedentedly excited. It stomped its feet, and its petite but agile body stood upright. It fearlessly faced the two-headed demon that was emitting the aura of a mountain, and slowly raised its hands. Although the scattered little mages had already been informed by Dake, when they saw the mantis trying to stop a chariot, they were still shocked. The lion head of the two-headed demon revealed a shocked expression, and the ox head became even more violent, as if it was completely enraged by the little cat's provocation. The blood mist on its right arm exploded, and it actually expanded again. But when Meow Meow saw this, it licked its lips and revealed a bloodthirsty expression. A white light bloomed from its palm, gradually enveloping its entire body. Divine light gathered in his languid eyes as he stared at the rapidly descending axe. Meow. A loud shout. Meow Meow raised its hands, and actually used the bare-handed blade catch method to catch the axe. Its two palms clamped the axe's blade, making it unable to move. Light swirled in its palms, and the magic card's attack value rapidly increased. It had already exceeded 4,000 points. Moo! The two-headed demon's 2 feet finally landed with a loud bang. The earth shook. The ox head roared in surprise, and its right arm frantically exerted strength. But no matter how much strength it exerted, there was a strange feeling of softness at the point of exertion. And the grey-furred Meow Meow was exerting its strength to its heart's content, using the borrowed strength from the ox head back to the ox head. Everyone looked as if they had just seen a ghost. The petite Meow Meow clamped the two-headed demon and used it as a base to lift the two-headed demon holding the axe. Even when its 2 feet left the ground, the two-headed demon was still unable to react. After its heavy body was lifted, it spun in the air, and then was smashed to the ground without any resistance. At that moment, the two-headed demon felt as if it had fallen into a dream. But the huge impact it felt when it was smashed to the ground was not fake. There was a delay of almost half a second. Both of its heads howled at the same time. Boom! The entire hall trembled because of this. Like a magic fairy, the magic power that made up its life force instantly fell. The two-headed demon's murderous aura was forcibly smashed apart. Even though it still had plenty of magic power, its spirit had been destroyed, and it no longer had the awe it had when it first appeared. Meow. After completing this feat, Meow Meow suddenly let go of its hands and flipped backward. After landing, it put its hands behind its back like a grandmaster, and its aura was awe-inspiring. The little magus, who had been keeping his eyes on it the entire time, suddenly saw a blur in his eyes. He actually saw a dark red giant axe in the other hand it had extended. Even when the two-headed demon was smashed to the ground, it did not let go of the two-headed demon's giant axe, but it had inexplicably appeared in its hand. Meow Meow revealed a proud smile. It could feel that this giant axe contained a very strong power. If it could use this power in its own equipment. But its palm suddenly became empty. The giant axe in its hand had been taken away. Meow. Meow Meow was about to become angry when it saw the Dilu beast holding the giant axe, and like lightning, it rushed towards the two-headed demon that was about to get up. With the holy ring as support, the Dilu beast's attack power had reached 2,400. Naturally, it was impossible for it not to use an axe. While it was running, its eyes overflowed with blood. It flowed down from its eyes, wrapped around its arms, and merged with the giant axe. Boom! The blood mist exploded. The Dilu beast's arms swelled, and its power increased sharply. His 2,400 attack power had increased to 3,400 in an instant. But its magic power was also quickly draining. 8,000/8,000. Chapter 355. From the feedback from the magic card, Dake suddenly understood. Originally, this giant axe was the two-headed devil's greatest reliance. This giant axe could absorb life force and transform it into power. At the same time that the Diru beast's strength increased by 1,000 points, its life force and magic power were also rapidly depleting. The reason why it was still able to move around was because of Doc's magical power. Coupled with the fact that the giant axe was damaged, the situation became even worse. Although Dake wanted to transfer his magic power to it, there was a limit to the speed of transferring magic power through the magic card when the magic fairy was summoned. The Diru beast was a 4-star magic fairy. Its normal consumption was 4 points of magic power per second. The limit of transferring magic power through the magic card was 8 points of magic power per second, which was twice the normal consumption. Moreover, the Archmage had to ensure the stability of the magic power transfer, and the magic fairy's magic power movement couldn't be too intense. Otherwise, the magic power transfer would be greatly reduced. In other words, when the Diru beast was fighting, Dake's magic power support was extremely limited. Otherwise, he would be very willing to bear the magic power consumption of the giant axe. While the Diru beast was rushing towards the two-headed devil, he quickly calculated. Remember the website, VIP Kanshu. VIP. The giant axe absorbed around 10 points of magic power per second. The Diru beast's magic power was 1,500 plus 500 points. This meant that under normal circumstances, it could only maintain this state for about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. 3 minutes and 20 seconds, it was only 20 seconds more than the 3 minutes of a certain glowing alien. If it was hit by 1 or 2 attacks in the middle of the battle, the duration would be even shorter. However, this didn't constitute a reason for the Diru beast to stop. The Diru beast's speed was constantly increasing. The sacred ring on its tail emitted a white light. As it ran, it drew out a snow-white stream of light. It actually produced a trace of beauty that was completely opposite to the bloodthirsty giant axe. The two-headed devil was only halfway up when the Diru beast's vigorous figure entered his vision. Ha! Only a loud shout was heard. The Diru beast seemed to have copied the two-headed devil's movement. After jumping high, it borrowed the force of the fall and suddenly chopped down with the giant axe. Roar! The lion head of the two-headed devil cultivator suddenly let out an explosive roar. Under its reminder, the ox head actually forcefully twisted its body, raised its thick right arm to block, and used its steel-like 5 fingers to pinch the blade of the huge axe. However, the strength of the Diru beast's strike was extremely great. It actually managed to forcefully press down the right arm, and a sinister wound appeared on the palm of the Diru beast. The two-headed devil cultivator was forced to loosen his 5 fingers. The Diru beast took the opportunity to retrieve its giant axe. Using one of its legs as a base, it suddenly spun the giant axe. Borrowing the force of the rotation to increase its strength, it once again chopped towards the two-headed devil's ankle. Roar! The two-headed devil cultivator immediately let out 2 miserable shrieks. Half of its right ankle had been cut in. His tendons were torn, and blood was gushing out. Cat eyes. The sudden command caused the Diru beast to widen its eyes as it retracted its axe. A scarlet light flashed in its eyes as it stared fiercely at the ox head. The ox head Talon had a violent temper and was bloodthirsty by nature. It was also the time when its heart was filled with anger. Being stared at by the cat eyes, its ferocity was completely aroused, and the bloody light in its eyes became dark red. Cat eyes emit light from the eyes, causing the opponent to fall into confusion. There is a chance that the opponent will attack itself. The cat eyes' mechanism to cause confusion was successfully triggered. The ox-head Talon suddenly turned his head and bit towards the lion-head Leon on the left. Although the lion-head Leon sensed that something was wrong, how could it avoid the head on the same shoulder? Fresh blood suddenly appeared. The ox-head Talon bit the lion-head Leon's right ear, and then with a ripping sound, the ear was forcefully torn off. Roar! Amidst the blood-curdling screams, the lion-head Leon's inner bestial nature was completely aroused, and its originally calm eyes became bloodshot. The two-headed devil cultivator gradually lost its rationality. Relying on the suppression of the cat eyes, the Dilu beast obtained precious time to breathe. Its eyes focused, and taking advantage of the fact that the two-headed devil cultivator had not recovered, it once again swung the giant axe. However, although the lion-head's bestial nature was aroused, it still reacted at this time. It endured the ox-head's bite, twisted its waist, and manipulated its two thick arms into two fists. Its right arm suddenly swept horizontally, forcing the Dilu beast away, and its left arm became a giant hammer, fiercely hammering down from above. Although this hammer did not hit the Dilu beast, when it landed on the ground, it created a strong shockwave, and actually further shook the Dilu beast away. Roar! In the roar, the two-headed devil cultivator finally stood up again. Although its momentum was broken, its ferocious aura did not weaken at all. As for the wound on its right ankle, it was also rapidly healing in the blood mist. As long as it was given a little time, it would completely recover its ability to move. However, the Dilu beast was not fighting alone. In other words, Dake Dimeng was not fighting alone. The black cat that looked like an alien and the bone snake that had a beautiful woman's pattern on the skin folds on its neck had already approached silently. Skeleton beauty snake, alluring woman soul. Sphinx cat, shadow step. The alluring woman soul that came out from the neck of the skeleton beauty snake floated like the wind towards the two-headed devil cultivator, passing through its body, causing its body to stiffen. The Sphinx cat silently appeared behind the two-headed devil cultivator, and stepped on its shadow. Then, the gold beast with golden wings on its back, gold coin bug, descended from the sky. As it flew over the head of the two-headed devil, two golden arrows shot out from its wings. Shockingly, they were aimed at the eyes of the ox-headed devil. With the reaction of the two-headed devil cultivator, the golden arrows could not hit it. However, the ox head was in a confused state, and its outline was fixed by the shadow step, so it did not dodge at all. At the crucial moment, the lion head that had just been bitten off one of its ears, returned good for evil, forcibly broke through the shadow step's restriction, and fiercely collided with the ox head, causing the two golden arrows to brush past its ears. Even so, the golden arrows undoubtedly attracted the lion head's attention. After the Dilu beast obtained enough buffer time, it once again accumulated power. With a light tap of its foot, it leaped up, and actually stepped on the spirit bear's palm. The spirit bear that was still maintaining bear's power, rushed forward like a chariot. Its huge body was not inferior to the two-headed devil cultivator, and it fiercely crashed into the two-headed devil cultivator's abdomen. The Dilu beast stepped on the spirit bear's palm, and once again swung the giant axe. When the spirit bear and the two-headed devil cultivator collided, it suddenly stepped forward, and gathered all the strength in its body to slash with the giant axe. Hiss! Hot blood sputtered out. The two-headed devil cultivator's abdomen was actually cut open by the Dilu beast's axe. The blood stained the giant axe, and it instantly disappeared. The Dilu beast felt that its right arm was getting heavier, and its face could not help but become gloomy. Until the two bottles of potion exploded on top of its head, and the scattered magic seeped into its skin, only then did it slightly recover. Dake, who had used 2 bottles of energy potion in succession, was very clear that the 400 points of magic could only support the Dilu beast for half a minute. A sense of urgency that he only felt during an official duel appeared on his face, and at the same time, excitement appeared in his eyes. 3 seconds later. In the name of Dake Dimeng, Magic Guide Summon, Trash Slime. In the name of Dake Dimeng, Magic Guide Summon, Horned Hawkman. In the name of Dake Dimeng, Magic Guide Summon, Big Milk Can. When the cute pink milk cow appeared at his feet, more Magic Guide fairies rushed from the surroundings, and they all joined the battle. It was clear that with Dake taking the lead, and Sarah and the other 2 joining the battle, the rest of the little magisters also gathered their morale. Although their Magic Guide fairies might not be of much use in this boss fight, but if they joined in, it would also bring them some mental benefits. Dake stretched out his hand and pressed on the Big Milk Can's head, gently stroking its soft fur, and whispered, "Big Milk Can, turn round." The opponent was a boss with high HP, magic, and they only relied on the Dilu beast's 3 minutes to win. The magic weakness of the multiform monster would also be magnified at this time. Only the Big Milk Can could win. Moo Moo Heart Suit, the big milk can rubbed against Dake's palm, but it rubbed its hands together, and a bottle of milk appeared. After Dake took the bottle of milk from its hands, its face turned serious, and it used round. The big milk can curled into a ball, and a layer of metallic luster lit up on the surface of its body, and its defense doubled. Very good roll. The big milk can shook a little, and immediately began to roll. From slow to fast, it gradually accelerated. When it got closer to the two-headed demon, its speed became faster. At this time, the Sphinx cat's shadow step had been broken. Although the beautiful lady's soul of the skeleton snake was still useful, the restriction on the two-headed demon's movements was gradually weakened, and the confusion effect caused by the Delu beast's cat's eye had long disappeared. The two-headed demon tightly covered the wound on its abdomen, and its two heads roared angrily. Bang! It only swung its right arm once, and all the 2-star and 3-star magic guide fairies were swept away. Even Anna's spirit bear couldn't block its punch. Although it didn't have the bloodthirsty giant axe, it still seemed to have mastered a sure-kill skill that increased its strength. Every punch of its right arm was as heavy as 1,000 pounds, and the magic guide fairies were smashed into pieces one by one. If it wasn't for the fact that the spirit bear had a certain degree of physical immunity, it would have turned into magic and dissipated. Meow! The Delu beast, who had recovered, stepped on the spirit bear's back, and accelerated all the way, leaping forward once again. However, this time, when it swung its giant axe down rapidly, the bull head suddenly raised its head, and actually used its two horns to block the giant axe, supporting it in the air. The same move can only be used once against the demon. The lion head's face was cold, and the blood that flowed out after its right ear was bitten off made it look even more ferocious and terrifying. When the little magisters suddenly realized that this second-grade boss could actually speak, the big milk can's first attack had already fiercely hit the two-headed demon's calf. It was just a weak attack, and the two-headed demon didn't pay too much attention to it. Its attention was more focused on the Delu beast. Or rather, it was on the giant axe in the Delu beast's hand. Time to return it to me. The two-headed demon suddenly raised its hand, and grabbed the handle of the giant axe. Whoosh! A gust of gloomy air whistled past. That beautiful woman's soul once again pierced through its body, causing its body to uncontrollably freeze for a moment. However, the lion head roared again, and its body regained its ability to move. The sure-kill skill of a mere 3-star magic guide fairy was greatly ineffective against a 6-star two-headed demon. However, the Delu beast seized the opportunity, and kicked the bull head, using the reaction force to fly back. Spirit bear. The spirit bear immediately raised its hand, and caught it. This unforeseen event caused the two-headed demon, who originally thought that the giant axe was at its fingertips, to surge with anger. Its right hamstring had already healed, and it immediately took a step forward, preparing to charge forward. However, with a bang, the milk jug rolled and hit the back of its foot. Although the force of this collision was still not great, it had already reached a level that could not be ignored. The two-headed demon turned around to catch it, but a box filled with gold suddenly appeared in its vision. Magic card, golden treasure box. Greed for wealth appeared in the two-headed demon's eyes. It subconsciously reached out to grab it, but its 5 fingers swept past, and the illusion was instantly shattered. The two-headed demon almost immediately broke free from the temptation of the golden treasure box. However, at this moment, the big milk can had already rolled away. The lion head made a prompt decision, gave up the big milk can, and continued to charge toward the spirit bear and the Delu beast. The man was here, and the axe was here. Being robbed of one's weapon was the greatest humiliation for a warrior. And on the spirit bear's back, Meow Meow, who received the order at the last minute, reluctantly handed the milk can to the Delu beast. The Delu beast was instantly overjoyed, and ate it in one gulp. In an instant, half of its magic power that was almost depleted was restored. That was enough to support it for more than a minute of intense exercise. Therefore, it did not hesitate to raise the giant axe again, and burst out with a burning battle intent, charging toward the two-headed demon from the front. Without the giant axe, the two-headed demon could only rely on its own strength to fight against the Delu beast. However, its seemingly crazy lion head still hid calmness in its eyes. When the Dilu beast pounced again, the bull head controlled its arms to meet the attack. The lion head, while the two sides were fighting, suddenly raised its head and roared. Sure kill skill. Beast King roar. Roar. This roar was so sudden. It was not used when it was sent flying, nor was it used when its abdomen was cut open. But it was waiting for this moment. The Dilu beast was unprepared for this terrifying roar. Its petite body flew out like a kite with a broken string. However, when it flew away, it still firmly held onto the giant axe. When its magic power was exhausted, it suddenly exerted force and threw the giant axe in the direction of the door. The giant axe cut through the air, and fell in an arc, half-dragon man. Teddy Dolong's loud shout resounded through the hall. A half-dragon half-human magic guide sprite suddenly jumped up, and its dragon claws that were covered with scales grabbed the flying giant axe. It's finally my turn. Dolong's eyes were filled with excitement. Card name, Half-Dragon Man. Type, Elf card. Level, ****. Race, Dragon. Attribute, Dragon. Magic power, 1400. Attack, 1400. Defense, 1300. Sure kill skill, Dragon scale armor, Dragon bloodline. A dragon species known for its strength. A 3-star overlord that was not inferior to a giant monster. This was Dolong's newly refined magic guide sprite. Half-Dragon Man. The Half-Dragon Man with a dragon head and a human body was covered in dragon scales, and a short dragon tail was dragged behind its buttocks. Its sure kill skill, Dragon scale armor, was a passive skill, which was the dragon scales that covered its entire body like armor. The skill-turned dragon scales were guaranteed in terms of strength, increasing its defense by a full 300 points. Therefore, the actual defense value of this half-dragon man was 1,600 points. It had already exceeded the limit of 3 stars. As for the other sure kill skill, Dragon bloodline, it was a sure kill skill that could be actively activated, causing it to grow wings, a dragon tail, and activate the dragon bloodline. Under the condition of activating Dragon bloodline, the 3 attributes of the half-dragon man would increase, and it would also obtain a certain degree of magic power recovery ability. Although the recovery ability was not enough to offset the damage caused by the giant axe. But it could undoubtedly make it more durable. Under Dolong's order, the half-dragon man raised its giant axe and charged forward. In the process of charging, it activated Dragon bloodline, and its speed suddenly increased by a lot. While the two-headed demon was boiling with anger, it did not hesitate to abandon the undying giant bear and waved its right arm to punch the giant axe that the half-dragon man was slashing at it. Bang! At this moment, a clear gap appeared between the strength of the two sides. Even with the giant axe in its hand, the attack of the half-dragon man only increased to 2,400 points. Compared to the two-headed demon whose basic strength was at least 3,000 points, the gap was huge. The giant axe was smashed to the ground. Half-dragon man! Dolong's scream was heard. But as the giant axe fell to the ground, the two-headed demon had already grabbed the half-dragon man's shoulder, threw it up, and smashed it down. Bang! With only a loud sound, the half-dragon man turned into magic power and disappeared. And the dark red bloodthirsty giant axe finally fell to the feet of the two-headed demon. It's time to end this. After a series of unforeseen events, the bullhead Talon's fierceness was restrained, and the lionhead Leon's dignity had gained the upper hand, and at the same time, it had obtained the sovereignty of this body. It manipulated its body, bent down, and reached out to grab the handle of the axe. Rumble! Just as it bent down, the third rolling milk can suddenly crashed into it from behind. The eyes of the two-headed demon flashed, and the moment it grabbed the handle of the axe, it turned around at high speed. The giant axe swung in a semicircle, and like lightning, it swept towards the milk can that was attacking from behind. The momentum of the milk can rolling became stronger each time. The increase in strength was more obvious each time. As long as one calmed down and thought for a moment, one would be able to foresee the hidden danger. The lionhead Leon was not like the bullhead Talon who was confused by the desire to kill. It analyzed the danger in an instant and chose to strangle it midway. However, the moment it turned around and swung the axe, its expression suddenly changed. It only felt that its whole body was soft, and the strength of the axe was reduced by 50%. Although the axe hit the rolling milk can, it was completely unable to stop it. Instead, it helped the milk can change the direction of its rolling. The milk can successfully completed its third roll and immediately became a yo-yo. The two-headed demon recovered its strength in an instant. Its 5 fingers suddenly tightened, and as it raised the giant axe, its gaze turned to the human closest to it. The golden-haired youth who was standing calmly now had 2 more magic elves by his side. One was a 3-star magic elf, Kettle Kettle. The other was a magic guide elf that had been upgraded to 2 stars, Ivan. After more than an hour of cooldown, Ibu's Pride 2 New was once again in a usable state. When the two-headed demon noticed him, it suddenly trembled inexplicably. The Lionhead Leon finally realized where the core of this group of uninvited guests, the biggest threat, was. Moo! The bullhead Talon, who had regained his bloodthirsty axe, was once again filled with a desire to kill. Without hesitation, it ran toward the Dake Dimming. The giant axe in its hand was already raised, and it was determined to chop it into minced meat. However, with a flash of light, a pitch-black ball appeared in front of the Dake. Mobius, I'm counting on you. Luo C clasped his hands and prayed hard. Sure kill skill, Mobius strip. A 7-colored halo bloomed from the pitch-black ball, and as it rotated, it spread out a huge force field, enveloping the two-headed demon within. When the two-headed demon's giant axe fell, it was as if it had sunk into a quagmire, unable to move an inch. Obviously, the impact of its downward slash had been completely absorbed. And above the Mobius worm's head, A1 quietly appeared. The sure kill skill of the Mobius worm, the Mobius strip, had a very interesting characteristic. Once one entered the force field produced by the Mobius strip, regardless of the force produced by the action, it would be absorbed and transformed by the force field. Even if one wanted to retreat, they would be squeezed by the force field. Rather than calling it a defensive skill, it was more of a control skill. The two-headed demon was completely controlled by the force field, and its movements were as slow as a snail's. Under such circumstances, after the milk can made a circle, it rolled once again. The fourth roll. The fourth roll under the circle state. The sure kill skill, roll, which had a base power of 30, had been raised to 480. With the milk can's 1000 points of attack, it used a sure kill skill with a power of 480. It was roughly twice the power of the Deathclaw of the demon beast with 2000 points of attack, or the power of a two-headed demon with 4000 plus attack power using a charged strike. When it rolled over, the milk can's body was already surrounded by a strong wind, making it like a windmill. Very quickly, it charged into the range of the Mobius strip's force field. In almost an instant, the one above the Mobius worm's head jumped to 2. Then it was followed by 3, 4. Every time the number jumped, there would be a sound like a piano key being pressed. It could be clearly seen that the two-headed demon was also exerting its power. Cover your ears. Dake suddenly remembered the sound wave attack he had endured in the hidden space, and hurriedly gave the order. The little magisters were originally nervously watching, and now they all covered their ears as if it was a conditioned reflex. Then, when the milk jug finally collided with the two-headed devil, it turned around and returned. The 4 above the Mobius worm's head jumped to 5. Chapter 356. From 1 to 5. Only a very short period of time had passed. After being touched by the milk jug, the two-headed devil was clearly enraged. Its exertion of strength greatly increased, and the muscles of its right arm that was holding the bloodthirsty great axe bulged even more. Thick and long blood vessels protruded from its skin, causing the scars on its arm to appear as if they were about to split open. Ha! The two-headed devil stomped its foot. The 5, on top of the Mobius worm's head instantly jumped to 6. Immediately after, when it widened its blood-red eyes and swung its great axe at the Mobius worm, it was as if it was breaking a 1000-layer jelly. The corners of its eyes were clearly raised, and its 4 eyes were blood red. Its aura was extremely shocking, but the way it swung its axe was weak, like a 2-headed girl without the strength to truss a chicken. It was extremely strange. However, after adapting to the discomfort, the 2-headed devil was clearly able to exert more strength in this force field. Although its axe was extremely slow, it was approaching the Mobius worm at a definite speed. However, just as the blade of the axe was about to touch it, the 6 on top of the Mobius worm's head finally jumped to 7. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. This meant that the Mobius worm's energy scale had reached its peak. The energy it absorbed and transformed through the Mobius loop was stored in the energy scale. Once it reached its peak, the force field of the Mobius loop would instantly disappear. The 2-headed devil suddenly recovered its strength, and its entire body was slightly unbalanced. However, it took advantage of the momentum to lean forward, and the great axe ignited with a bloody light as its roar soared to the sky. That axe gathered strength at an extremely fast speed, and along with the roar of the 2-headed devil, it fiercely chopped down on the Mobius worm's body. In that instant, the continuous buzzing sound from the core of the Mobius worm instantly erupted. It was a sure kill skill that originally had almost zero power: ultrasonic wave. However, after the energy scale reached its peak, the energy absorbed by the Mobius worm was completely released through the ultrasonic wave. Although there would be a large loss in the transformation of energy, the power of the ultrasonic wave still exceeded the limits of the first tier of magic elves. In an instant, the explosive sound of the ultrasonic wave spread out like a tide. The 2-headed devil that was closest to the attack was actually blown away by the supersonic wave. It would never have imagined that the black sphere could release such a terrifying impact just as it was about to kill the Mobius worm. If it was just a physical impact, it would have been fine. Its brain was invaded by the sound waves. The sound that was extremely similar to the sound of nails scratching glass stimulated its 2 brains to the point that they almost exploded. As a result, even more chaotic memory fragments surged out. Bang! The 2-headed devil cultivator let out a painful wail after falling. The lion-headed Leon's face was distorted because of this, and he suddenly crashed into the bull head on the right. Minotaur Talon's eyes reddened as he took the hit. He turned around and retaliated fiercely. The 2 sides actually collided with each other. However, this strange scene did not attract the attention of many people. When the little archmages were hit by the indiscriminate sound wave attack, they all clutched their heads in pain. Even though they did not bear the brunt of the impact, the ear-piercing sound waves were still unbearable. For a moment, both sides lost their will to fight. Only the milk can was still persistently rolling. After leaving the range of the force field, the power that it had accumulated through the 4 rolls gradually exploded. Due to the high speed of rotation, the air current had already surrounded its body, causing it to become like a storm wheel. It was abnormally terrifying. The sound waves were blocked by the wild wind and did not have much of an effect on it. As it rolled, including the air current, its diameter was already more than 5 meters, and it was still expanding. Taking advantage of the 2-headed devil dragon's confusion, the milk conformed a storm wheel and rolled with an unstoppable momentum. Its momentum seemed to be able to crush everything. However, it was still not enough. Dake struggled to break free from the influence of the sound waves. He then hugged Ibusa and anxiously shouted, "Use help!" Squeak, squeak! Ibusa squeaked softly. With the help of its master, it forcefully pulled itself together and clapped its front paws with force. Squeak, squeak! Squeak, squeak! Amidst the clapping, a snow-white light was emitted from its hands and instantly rushed into the milk can's body. The milk can immediately felt a warm current enter its heart. As it felt the warmth, the energy in its body became more active. Its strength, which had already increased by 32 times, actually increased by another 50%. This meant that the power of its roll this time was a total of 1,440. This was almost 3 times the power of the 2-headed devil dragon's attack when it was holding a giant axe. It could instantly kill a devil beast with 3 times the attributes. Unknowingly, the little mages had already forgotten the stabbing pain in their heads. All that was left in their eyes was the fearful storm wheel. The storm wheel, which had a diameter of more than 10 meters, rolled towards the two-headed devil dragon with an extremely frightening momentum. The two sides had not yet gotten close to each other, but the raging storm had already attacked. The two-headed devil dragon was stung by the storm and finally woke up from the chaos. The ox-head Talon was still berserk, but the lion-head Leon's eyes were already filled with shock. Even in the battle of the devil race in the memory fragments, he had rarely seen such a terrifying magic. Recalling how the milk jug had rolled over and over again, a trace of fear suddenly rose in the heart of Lionhead Leon. The opponent was not an uninvited guest who had accidentally intruded. It was a crusader who had long prepared for this. However, when the wise Lionhead Leon had the intention to retreat, the berserk Oxhead Talon had taken control of the body. Conquer! The Oxhead Talon raised his giant axe again. Facing the milk can that could crush him into pieces, he actually let out a furious roar and rushed forward like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Fresh blood had already dyed his eyes red. The desire to kill was once again boiling. It was as if he had returned to the battlefield when he was alive. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the most dangerous enemy. Kill! Moo! Under everyone's gaze, the two bulls collided fiercely in the palace. The dark red giant axe cut through the air, and a scarlet blood mist rose and exploded. The storm whistled and flattened everything. The two-headed devil dragon's giant axe chopped down on the storm wheel, but it was only for a moment before it was swept away by the violent wind. The web between its thumb and forefinger was split open, and blood gushed out. Roar! It was a terrifying roar that seemed to force its life out. The two-headed devil dragon actually launched a bull's charge when it lost its weapon. Boom! There was no suspense in the collision this time. The first to be crushed was the shoulder and arm. Then, it was the other half of the body and the ox head that was close to the right. The remaining Lionhead Leon let out a roar at the last moment of its life. The majesty that it had when it opened its eyes seemed to have never existed. Fear was rooted in its heart. However, it, who had already become history on the battlefield, was only facing death once again. The boss of the second level of the underground city, the two-headed devil dragon Talon Leon Cairn Sutter, was completely crushed by the milk can. There was not a single bit of material left. The two-headed devil dragon directly turned into specks of magic power, blooming and disappearing like fireworks. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It entered the reincarnation cycle of the underground city once again. After this attack, the high-speed airflow around the milk can quickly disappeared. It dizzily tiptoed and spun around twice before sitting on the ground. The voices of the little magisters suddenly rang out at this moment. Dake had never used the milk can's roll in public before. No one knew that this cute milk can actually have such a terrifying killing move. The last rolling attack just now made people suspect that even the third-tier magisters would not be able to withstand it. If this scene appeared in the new player competition, it would be enough to make all the spectators go crazy. Dake Dimming was really the star of tomorrow. Is it over? AI Ma Métis suppressed the shock in her heart and carefully walked to Dake's side. Dake frowned and carefully observed for a moment. He hesitated and said, "Should be?" This was because he really did not know enough about this level of boss. He also did not know if it had a secret rebirth technique like the vampire Vlad. Therefore, he did not dare to make a judgment at this moment. However, Saraswati strode over and said casually, "Even its ashes were scattered. How can it come back to life?" Deanna said, "Ashes? Isn't it magic that was scattered?" With a wave of her hand, Rose recalled the Mobius worm, whose skills had entered cooldown, back into the magic card. The discussions became louder and louder, and the other students also came over. A voice echoed in the spacious palace. Dake bent down and supported the milk can that was wobbling over. Then he used both hands to rub its cheeks and said softly, "Good job." Moo. The milk can immediately became spirited and patted its chest to show that it could still fight. Bzzz. Squeak. Hoo-Hoo and Ibu's head also came in, causing Dake to look around. The Dilu beast walked over with tired steps and quietly stood beside Dake. Dake came back to his senses and picked it up. Of course I won't forget the most obedient Dilu beast. On the pale face of the Dilu beast, a strange blush suddenly appeared. After Dake put it down, he looked up and saw that Meow Meow was circling around the bloodthirsty great axe. It obviously wanted to put the great axe into its treasure trove, but it was afraid of its ability to devour life. Now that the two-headed demon had been reduced to ashes, this huge axe was probably the most precious spoils of war. I wonder if there are any hidden treasure chests at the end of this hall? Dake couldn't help but blurt out when he thought of this. Anna heard his reminder and her eyes lit up. She shouted, "That's right, there are still treasure chests." Doran was still in the midst of the joy of defeating the boss. At this moment he also shouted, "A treasure chest guarded by a boss, there should be something good, right?" Thus, more students responded and the topic of everyone's discussion turned to the treasure chests that had not been discovered yet. However, even though they were talking, no one rushed up to look for it. When Dake felt a little puzzled, he suddenly realized that everyone's eyes were on his face. He couldn't help but be a little stunned. Then, he calmly said, "If that's the case, then let's go look for the treasure chests." "Okay." Amazed face, // / with Anna and Doran taking the lead, the little mages immediately ran into the hall. There shouldn't be any more danger, right? Dake couldn't help but relax a little. He didn't put the magic fairy back into the card. He even used the energy potion to replenish the Dilu beast's magic. In the blink of an eye, only AI Ma, Luo Si, Sarah and Sarah's follower Heidi were left beside him. A group of 10 people, half of them rushed to the inside of the hall. Even if there was no light there, it couldn't stop their enthusiasm. The girl from the Noble Academy in Doran's group took out a magic card and summoned a bright ball of light, illuminating the surroundings. "Let's go too." Doc took a deep breath and took a step forward. He bypassed Meow Meow, who was still circling around the bloodthirsty axe, and walked towards the skeleton throne on the high platform. In the entire hall, the skeleton throne was the most eye-catching. In the shadow behind the throne, a rat-like monster poked its head out of the shadow. It raised its nose and sniffed, showing a human-like disappointed expression. "Is it already dead? Looks like I'm late." The monster looked left and right. Suddenly, its ears pricked up when it heard footsteps. It immediately burrowed into the shadow and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Dake walked to the back of the skeleton throne. He looked a little puzzled, but didn't find anything unusual. He shook his head and turned to leave. Not long after, the little fatty Pit-Tan shouted, "Found it, I found it. Looks like there really is a treasure chest." Only then did Doc smile, and quickly walked over with the magic elves. A treasure chest, of course, that's a good thing. When the two-headed demon was reduced to ashes, only a treasure chest could soothe his sorrow. Pit-Tan waited for everyone to gather before letting his magic elf open the chests. It was a bronze treasure chest, about 1 meter long and wide. The ashes covering it made it give off an ancient aura. The chest was locked with an iron chain. But Pixen's magical elf directly broke the lock, making the chain seem like it didn't exist. "Looks like it's not a treasure chest monster." The little magisters let out a sigh of relief. Then the magic fairy suddenly opened the lid of the treasure chest in one breath. What hit them in the face was a cloud of dust that suddenly flew up. A few people who were closer hurriedly covered their mouths with their hands, but they still couldn't stop coughing. When the dust settled, they could clearly see the contents of the treasure chest. The first thing they saw was a layer of gold coins on top. "It's the currency of the demons." Sarah and AI Ma's voices rang out at almost the same time. 2 in 1 4,000. Today, I owe about 30 chapters. But on the first day, there's always a lot. After that smiley face angle, so there shouldn't be much of a problem. Wait for New Year's Eve and roll for everyone, let's celebrate together. Chapter 357. Ever since the end of the war, the demon race's currency had completely disappeared from the market. The demon race's currency that most people collected at home was only there as spoils of war. However, there were actually two types of demon race's currency. One was the normal metal currency with a serial number printed on it, and the other was the magic crystal currency that only had the Demon King's head imprinted on it. The value of magic crystal coins was, of course, much higher than the normal metal currency. And the magic crystal coins that appeared in this underground city also had extremely high historical value. Sarah and AI Ma had done some research on this and were very interested. However, the other little magisters hoped to find some magic tools in the treasure chests. While most people showed disappointed expressions, Sarah and AI Ma quickly stepped forward and each took out a magic crystal coin from the treasure chests to examine it carefully. "How about I go and see if there are any other treasure chests?" The little fatty, Pitan, rolled his eyes and said, "Let's go. Remember the website, Vipkanshu." Sixdoran waved his hand and excitedly led the way. After the two left, the atmosphere here became much quieter. Anna stuck her head out and looked into the treasure chest. She reached out to grab a handful of magic crystal coins, but AI Ma patted her lightly, probably to tell her to take it easy. However, Anna didn't care. She stuck her claws into the pile of magic crystal coins and dug deeper. She actually pulled out a bull's horn. This bull's horn was the size of 2 palms and couldn't be compared to the two-headed demon's horn at all. However, it had a kind of sparkling and translucent feeling. It was also a round milky white horn that made people feel quite fond of it. Anna was immediately happy. "Look what I found?" She raised the bull's horn and showed it to Dake. After Dake saw the bull's horn, the regret that he felt from the two-headed demon's ashes finally disappeared slightly. At least there were materials that dropped, although it was in the form of a treasure chest. He whispered, "Maybe there's something else in this treasure chest?" When AI Ma and Sarah heard this, they turned to look at each other. Sparks flashed in their eyes, and then they stretched out their hands at the same time. In the end, AI Ma returned empty-handed, but Sarah smiled proudly. She found another thing from the treasure chest, a bracelet with 6 fangs. A bull's head and a lion's head, then these should be lion's fangs, right? With that said, Sarah injected her magic power in an attempt to trigger it. However, the bracelet was just a simple bracelet that connected the 6 fangs together. It wasn't some kind of magical tool. In that case, she turned to look at the others. "Let's divide the 6 fangs into 3 groups, with 2 fangs in each group. What do you think?" The girl from the aristocratic academy in Dolong's group replied, "I don't mind." Sarah nodded and said, "As long as you agree. Then Anna's horn will be given to Dake's team. They have 4 people in their team, and they have contributed the most. There shouldn't be any problems with this distribution. As for the magic crystal coins in this chest, we'll divide them according to the number of people." Dake smiled slightly, indicating that he didn't have any objections. Sarah's distribution plan was in line with what he had in mind. However, there was still a spoil of war in this hole. He directly opened his mouth and said, "Then how about the two-headed devil's weapon be mine?" Sarah smiled sweetly. "That's how it should be. I think Dolong won't have any objections." As she said that, Dolong's side suddenly cheered. Could there be another treasure chest? Dake subconsciously turned his head and found that in another corner of the hall, Dolong and Pitan were working together to drag an old treasure chest out. Then, the two of them didn't even need the help of the magic elves. With just a tug, they tore off the rotten lock. Dolong proudly inserted his finger into the gap of the treasure chest and suddenly lifted the lid. The two of them, who didn't learn their lesson, were once again covered in dust. However, this couldn't hide their excitement. The treasure chest was also filled to the brim with magic crystal coins. Dolong imitated them and put his hand into the magic crystal coins, but after fishing for a long time, he only pulled out a stone. "What is this?" Looking at the strangely shaped stone in his hand, Dolong had a confused expression. Pitan came over and looked for a long time, but his face was also filled with confusion. Clearly, with their knowledge, they were completely unable to decipher the origins of this stone. Pitan suggested, "Let's ask Sarah." Dolong, That's true. Thus, the two of them excitedly ran back. So energetic. Dake sighed inwardly. The stone that Dolong had discovered was very strange in shape. It was like large and small blocks were melted together. It had a metallic texture, but it wasn't hard. Instead, it had a gelatinous softness to the touch and emitted a unique warmth. It was alive. Although Dake had a vague guess, he couldn't be sure. He also looked at Sarah, who had a better understanding of the stone. Sarah was using magic power to examine it. After a while, she exclaimed, "If my judgment isn't wrong, this should be living metal. I didn't expect to be able to obtain such a rare ore from a treasure chest in this dungeon." Ai Ma's heart stirred as she said, "Living metal. Is it a biological ore?" Sarah looked at her approvingly and said, "There's also such a name. Living metal is a type of metal that mimics life. It's between living things and metal, and is the main material for making marionettes." Dolong asked, "What's a marionette?" Sarah spoke with assurance. A marionette can be considered a type of golem. But it's more exquisite than an ordinary golem and more like a human. They have soft skin and smooth joints. Expensive potions flow through their veins. They can metabolize like humans. They also have intelligence higher than ordinary golems. Their intelligence level is between 3.0 and 3.5. They can learn some simple knowledge and express some simple emotions. If one doesn't observe them carefully, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between them and humans. There's actually such a thing? Why have I never heard of it? Dolong couldn't help but be surprised. Sarah casually said, "Marionettes are the entry-level work of a master alchemist. In other words, only a master alchemist has the ability to refine a qualified marionette. And the main material for refining a marionette, living metal, is a specialty of the demon race. In this day and age, it's no longer possible to produce marionettes. It's natural that you haven't heard of it." Master alchemist. Fatty Pittan suddenly slammed his fist against his palm. "Then if we give this piece of living metal to Professor Ka Zayer, will we get extra credits?" Dolong's eyes immediately lit up as he said excitedly, "Pittan, this is a really good idea." "Good your ass," Sarah said disdainfully. "What can such a small piece of living metal do? A 3-inch man? 3-inch man." But Sarah's mockery gave Dake a hint. He thought to himself, if we use this living metal to refine equipment. Of course, refining a steel elemental magic elf is also an idea. How about this? Dake decided. If you give this piece of living metal to me, I can pay credits. How about 1,000 per person? 1,000 per person? Pittan's gaze turned and he said in astonishment, "Then wouldn't that be 9,000 credits?" Dolong nudged his arm and said with a smile, "How can that be? 100 credits is enough." Hey, don't stare at me, don't stare at me. I'm just kidding. How can I ask Dake to pay credits? We didn't do anything in this crusade against the boss. Of course, we can't ask for this living metal. Anna retracted her gaze and snorted with a pout. Sarah also said, "Don't look at me. I think that since I did put in some effort in this crusade against the boss, it's not too much to ask for a lion fong. The rest is up to your group." This group was, of course, Dake's group of 4. In fact, in this crusade against the boss, the only ones who did put in effort were Dake's group, Sarah, and Dolong. Since the two of them had expressed their stance, Dake wasn't a pretentious person and immediately accepted the piece of living metal. The group walked around the hall one more time. After confirming that there were no more treasure chests, they began to divide the loot. There were 100 magic crystal coins in the 2 treasure chests. If the 10 of them were to split it, each of them would get 10 magic crystal coins. As for the lion fangs, each group got 2 each. Dake took the 2 fangs, took the bullhorn and the living metal, then wrapped a cloth around the handle of the bloodthirsty great axe and let Meow Meow carry it. Meow Meow proudly carried the great axe with a satisfied look on its face. But not long after it carried it it couldn't help but glance at the magic crystal coins in the other people's hands, its eyes shining. Dake took the spoils of war and was about to say that they would distribute them when they returned, when he suddenly saw Meow Meow, carrying the great axe, meowing at Sarah's follower, Heidi, whose hair was tied into 2 thick braids that hung in front of her chest. This gray cat was clearly carrying a blood-stained great axe, but no matter how you looked at it, it was cute. Heidi couldn't help but crouch down and reach out her hand. Meow Meow placed its left paw in her palm. Meow, Heidi's hand, which was holding a magic crystal coin, couldn't help but press on her cheek and let out a cute sound. Meow. Meow Meow urged. Heidi willingly stuffed the magic crystal coin in her hand into Meow Meow's paw. Dake's forehead twitched as he saw this. He immediately injected a trace of magic power into Meowma's magic card, and then gave it a subtle glare. Meow Meow's expression suddenly froze. It reluctantly put the magic crystal coin back into Heidi's hand, and then meowed a few times obediently. Heidi was instantly bewitched, and her impression of Meow Meow improved a little. Little did she know, she had lost her value in Meow Meow's heart. Next, the 3 groups of 10 people rested on the spot. For the little mage trainers, they didn't have much time to be in close contact with their classmates from different schools. The 10 of them released their familiars to patrol, and the atmosphere was relaxed as they chatted. Sarah's group and Doran's group had been very interested in the missing 2 people for a long time. At this time, they couldn't help but ask. Of course, they wouldn't ask Dake. Instead, they asked AI Ma, who didn't speak much. Although AI Ma was helpless, she still told her group what had happened. The more she said, the more strange the 2 groups looked. In the end, when she talked about how White and Luo both were sent out of the dungeon by the magic eyes ray, Heidi finally couldn't help but say, "Oh my God. Don't you know that things don't happen more than 3 times? AI Ma glanced at her with a guilty conscience and didn't dare to refute. Speaking of which, her group was able to die 3 times in a row. She also couldn't shirk the responsibility. However, Doran's and Sarah's groups, who were preparing to challenge the level boss, also had the idea of risking their lives. Let's not talk about our elder sister, who isn't a curious cat. In the end, they were just not strong enough. AI Ma held the magic crystal coin and had an idea. Half an hour later. After the rest, the 3 groups set off again. To all of them, the fact that this dungeon adventure could end with a successful crusade against a tier boss was already considered to be very satisfactory. Now, they only needed to return to Professor Nini's side. The return journey was very smooth. The magical beasts on level 2 were nothing in front of the first-year elites. When they returned to the entrance of level 2, the sky wasn't dark yet. Under the protection of Professor Nini, the students who stayed at the entrance completed the mission of hunting magical beasts alone. They were now surrounding the Toad Fountain. They sang, danced, and made Professor Nini happy. The students had found new entertainment and would feed her from time to time. After this dungeon adventure, Professor Nini's prestige in front of the students would drop further, but her intimacy with them would increase greatly. The return of the 3 groups of 10 attracted attention. Professor Nini happily picked up the registration board and walked over, but halfway through, she pursed her lips when she saw Emma, who was alone on the board. "Mortis, where are your teammates?" Professor Nini asked anxiously. AI Ma could only brace himself and report to Professor Nini that 2 of his teammates had disappeared. Professor Nini let out a sigh of relief and pursed her lips even more. She was only a small professor who was still in the probation period. She didn't have as much assets as other professors. Moreover, the danger of the 2 students would lower her evaluation in Professor Shi Erfu's heart. It would have a negative impact on her success in the probation period and her hopes of continuing as a professor in the next semester. Fortunately, the 2 students didn't seem to be injured. The disappearance of White and Luo Boat and Meow Meow, who was carrying the bloodthirsty great axe, attracted the attention of the students. But after the 3 groups registered their return at Professor Nini's place, they smiled and dispersed. Dake called AI Ma over and began to divide the loot. Besides the materials dropped by the ordinary magical beasts, all the loot is here. The loot to be distributed is 1 bull horn and 2 lion fangs. I already have enough loot, so I won't participate in the distribution. The 3 of you can have 1 each. For 000/8000, create a mission to urge yourself to repay your debt. But you have to wait until tomorrow morning. Seeking monthly votes to rank up the rankings on smiley face, angle. Give me the items from the bag of fortune. I'll take all of them. Chapter 358. Dake said as he put the horn and the lion's tooth on the cloth. The milky white horn was sparkling and smooth. There were obvious bloodlines on the inside of the 2 lions' fangs. Although they did not drop from the tier boss, the 2-headed devil, they seemed to be of a higher quality, making it difficult to guess where they came from. The other 3 people sitting around carefully looked at the 3 materials that could be used as the core of the magic alchemy and thought carefully. After a while, Luo-Si pointed at one of the lion's fangs and said, "Then I'll take this lion's tooth." There was only 1 horn, but there were 6 lion's fangs. She obviously thought that the horn was rarer than the lion's tooth, so she chose the lion's tooth. No. Anna immediately denied. Besides Dake, you contributed the most. You should have taken this horn. Ma agreed. Yes, I think so too. This. Luo-Si couldn't help but feel troubled, but even if I take it, it won't be of much use. They were all good kids. Dake said, "How can it be of no use? Although you didn't join the dueling club this semester, you will need it in your 2nd year. This horn has a very pure feeling. It suits you very well." Yes. Anna immediately nodded. It really suits you. Luo-Si was still hesitating. Ma slightly raised her voice. It's like this. I'm not very interested in the horn and the lion's tooth. If you're willing to pay me some magic crystal coins, I won't take my share of the materials. Although magic crystal coins were expensive, there was still a gap between them and these rare materials that could be used as the core of the magic alchemy. It was just that Ma's need for magic crystal coins was higher than other materials, so to her, the value of magic crystal coins was comparable to the 2 core materials. If this deal could be reached, it would be beneficial for both sides. But Anna didn't think so much. She just followed Ma's idea and asked, "Is 10 enough?" Emma smiled and nodded. "Of course it's enough. If you pay me 10 magic crystal coins, I won't participate in the distribution of these core materials." "Then it's a deal." Anna nodded and turned around to count 10 magic crystal coins from her backpack. She and Luo-Si's magic crystal coins were placed together. After Ma took the 10 magic crystal coins, she got the reward she wanted and was obviously quite satisfied. Then, however, Diana, who had obtained the remaining 2 lion's fangs, rolled her eyes and pondered for a while. Suddenly, she picked up one of the lion's fangs and placed it in her palm. Then, she stretched it forward and said to Doc, "Here. 5 magic crystal coins." This sudden action not only surprised Ma and Luo-Si, but also Dake couldn't help but laugh. He didn't say anything and counted 5 magic crystal coins from his backpack. He stacked them on Anna's palm and said with a smile, "Then 5. Anna couldn't help but laugh even more happily. Dake took the lion's tooth from her palm. In this way, he got a new core material. The remaining one, of course, was Anna's. Ma looked at the interaction between them and couldn't help but feel envious. But there were some things that couldn't be envied. She sighed slightly and could only focus on studying the magic crystals in her hand. A total of 20 magic crystals. Maybe it was an opportunity for her to break through. And after Dake got the lion's tooth, the harvest of this trip to the underground city increased by another level. In summary, they were Rusty Sword 18 Faceted Crystal Bloodthirsty Axe Living Metal Lion's Tooth Magic Crystal Coins X5. As for the other materials, maybe they could be ground into various kinds of experimental powder, or maybe they could be used as auxiliary materials in magic refining, but it wasn't important. Dake used 2 fingers to pick up the lion's tooth that was finally in his hand and thought about how to use it. If only I had lion grass, I could use this lion's tooth and the fruit of pride, produced by the lion grass, to try to refine the sun-crowned beast. But if I want to successfully guide this sun-crowned beast, I'm afraid I'll need to add some fire element auxiliary materials. How about this? Tomorrow I'll go to the cat-grass flower shop and ask. Even if the lion grass's bad habit of biting people hasn't been solved, I can still use the method of renting it. TSK, I feel like this is a scumbag looking for someone to replace him. No, I still have to go there. The sun-crowned beast was the pre-evolved form of Apollo, the sun god of the 12 Olympian gods in Digimon. In Dake's research on pride, it was very important. If he could make the sun-crowned beast evolve into the ultimate Apollo, then his research on pride could basically graduate. So even if there was a chance of failure, he still had to try. Similarly, refining the lunar god beast was also part of his plan. Time slowly passed, and the 10 or so groups that were free to move around returned. Professor Nini counted the number of groups that returned with her fingers. When the last group of students appeared in her field of vision, she let out a sigh of relief. Everyone has arrived. Only the first and second level of the dungeon were free to move around, so the danger was reduced to a minimum. As long as they remembered the things that were taught in class and remained careful, the first-year students who dared to form groups and take risks were unlikely to encounter any accidents. Even if Amagus was just a beginner, they were still far stronger than other professions of the same level. In reality, this was the case. If it wasn't for the hidden space, White could have easily swept the second level with Troll. So in the end, only 2 people managed to activate the dungeon escape device. This price was barely within Professor Nini's range of tolerance. It was just that she would have to live frugally for the next month. Professor Nini patted her cheeks and thought about how annoying those 2 people were. She then said, since everyone is here, the next step is to show off the loot. Starting from the aristocrat house, line up and show off the loot that you obtained from hunting monsters. I will record it down one by one. The results of this mission will be used as a reference for your final grade. The students already knew about this, so they were just whispering. Let's go first. Dake didn't decline and let Meow Meow carry the bloodthirsty axe to show off. The students had already seen the axe, but only when Dake officially announced it, did they finally realize that Dake and the others had successfully hunted a boss. The result of this battle was astonishing. Then, Deanna and Luo C went up. Then, it was Doran's group. The whole process was very fast. Basically, everyone went up and came back down. Not long after, Professor Nini completed the whole registration process. She looked at the recorded content and was quite satisfied. If I tell Auntie Shi Erfu that my students successfully hunted a boss, she will lessen her reproach for me, right? Finally, under Professor Nini's lead, the first-year students returned to the entrance of the first level faster than when they came and stepped out of the door. The sky was already dark. The magic door, which was like a water curtain, emitted light and illuminated the 12 colossal statues standing around it. The upperclassmen who entered and exited the magic door curiously looked at the first-year students and guessed how bad their first experience would be. However, except for a few people, the first-year students had a very good dungeon experience this time. The students who were free to go had the adventure experience they wanted. The students who followed Professor Nini also had the spring outing experience they wanted. No one cared about the 2 students who were still in the infirmary and were being punished by Sister Kalien. Sister Kalien was never soft-hearted when it came to punishing students. The first Magical Beasts class in March was officially over under the light of the magic door. Professor Nini finally imitated Professor Shi Erfu's tone. Ignoring the strong protests of the little magisters, she gave out the homework for the day with a straight face, to write a dungeon adventure diary of no less than 500 words. Then, the whole team disbanded. The hungry students immediately rushed to the cafeteria in the castle. Of course, there were also people who changed their direction halfway and ran to the already open Traveler's Street. Dake's team chose to go to the cafeteria. When he walked out of the circular building, he thought for a while and called Ai Ma, who was sitting at the same table as the other 2, along. Therefore, the 6 of them, including Susan and Lucy, found a place in the cafeteria and had a celebratory meal. The conflict between the aristocratic house and the Knights' College was not reflected among the 6 of them. Susan and Lucy were easy to get along with, and it didn't take long for them to get along well with Deanna. The two of them chattered and asked about their experiences in the dungeon. Deanna described vividly and sometimes used exaggerated body language to demonstrate, making the atmosphere very lively. After the meal, the few of them still wanted to continue, but they all had things to do, and it was impossible for them to continue chatting in the cafeteria. Dake, Deanna, and Luo Si returned to the tower of the aristocratic house. Under the sharp gaze of the feathered serpent golem, they carried the bloodthirsty giant axe into the common room. Then, they found an empty table in the common room and began to divide the loot again. But this time, it was the ordinary monster materials that were distributed. Basically, the three of them divided it equally. But it would also be adjusted according to the preferences of the three of them. Because there were a lot of miscellaneous items, it took more than half an hour to complete the distribution. When the three of them each brought a large pile of materials back to the dormitory, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. It's not time to slack off yet. Dake looked at the large pile of materials and decided to process them immediately. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, he finished processing all the ordinary materials and put them in categories. Then, he glanced at the rusted sword and giant axe leaning against the corner of the wall, suppressed the urge to immediately study them, and turned to the bathroom to take a shower. After he came out, he opened Paradise and summoned all the magic guide fairies. Then, Dake asked the milk can to take care of the 3 catnip plants, and began to use Soul Loss Spell and Dark Spirit Spell to draw today's Great Sin. On the first day of March, he chose to draw 5 points of Greed. And today, it was also Greed. Although he had plans to try to refine the Sun-Crown Beast, it was not too late to draw Pride, after confirming that there was a way to get the lion grass. After finishing the routine, Dake could finally settle down and study the thing he wanted to study the most, the rusted sword. Ever since he knew that the hidden space was triggered by the AI Ma, Dake had a feeling in his heart and had greater expectations for the value of this rusted sword. According to the usual rules, this type of treasure was likely to be a key item that could run through the plot in a game where the hero was the protagonist, the Holy Sword. Although it was covered in rust. Although this world had the Holy Sword spell, a spell card that could summon the Holy Sword. But before the emergence of magic technology, the Holy Sword had already existed. Of course, the Holy Sword at that time could not be a spell or projection. It was a real Holy Sword, a sacred weapon that could cause special damage to the demons. Although the attribute of the Holy Sword was not necessarily light, it definitely had a sacred nature. If this rusted sword was really the legendary Holy Sword that could only be used by the hero, then as a reserve of the demon god, could he make this Holy Sword react? Because there was such a possibility, Dake did not dare to try it along the way. However, since even the feathered serpent statue at the gate of the Aristocrat Academy could not see through the demon god factor hidden in his body, it could be seen that he was still a pure-blooded human being with a demon god bloodline awakening progress at 0%. It was just that his talent related to magic was affected by this and slightly exceeded the limits of human beings. Therefore, the final result required more in-depth research. Let's start by injecting magic. Dake picked up the rusted sword and carefully examined it. He was ready to inject magic to observe the reaction. With the paradise shrouding it, some of the aura was not easy to spread out. As a little magic gathered at the tip of his finger, Dake released magic at the rusted short sword with a finger's distance between them. Dong! The rusted sword moved obviously. There's a reaction. Dake immediately withdrew his hand cautiously. He was not sure if this was a reaction of affinity or rejection. But since there was a reaction, it meant that this rusted sword was at least a type of magic tool. Then, let's continue. Doc swallowed his saliva and gathered his magic power again. In fact, his curiosity was not inferior to that of a cat. 8000/8008. Thank you to Violet and Yuriko for the silver treasure chest. Everyone's happy. I wish the big boss Golden Bull wealth, Pink Bull luck, and Red Bull success. Thank you to HGCHJGTG, Rodors, Lonely Swaying, Strive, Idiot and Scattercoins, and other readers who are too many to write their names at the end of the chapter for their monthly votes, rewards, blades, recommendation tickets, support, and blessings. I wish everyone good luck in the year of the ox. Let's work hard together and succeed in learning. Looking for monthly votes to get on the list. Chapter 359. While Dake was studying the rusted sword, the rest of the magic guide elves gathered around. Only Meow Meow was lying on the bed with a shield turtle jade in one hand and a magic crystal coin in the other. From time to time, it would knock twice, making tinkling sounds. Because it had performed exceptionally well today, using deceive and thief very well, Doc rewarded it with a small red flower. After it got the small red flower, Meow Meow immediately used it to offset its debt and buy a magic crystal coin. As for the shield turtle jade in its hand, it was a purple orb summoned by the treasure-gathering technique. It was the product of a high-grade magic beast called the shield turtle. It could absorb physical impact and convert it into magic. The effect of the shield turtle jade was easily associated with Luo C's Mobius worm. It was unknown if something similar could be refined. But now, this thing belonged to Meow Meow, and it had the right to use it. Moreover, Dake had obtained too many resources in today's adventure in the dungeon, so he had no time to pay attention to this purple orb. In just a few seconds, Dake poured magic into the rusted sword for the second time. This time, the magic power condensed was at least 3 times more than the previous time. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. The rusted sword's reaction was indeed more intense. He thought for a moment, then suddenly reached out and decisively grasped the hilt of the sword. Then, through the contact of his palm, he poured a large amount of magic power into the sword. The magic power surged like a tide and rushed into the dagger in an instant. Through magic perception, he could clearly feel that the dagger's interior was engraved with a very complicated magic circuit. As soon as the magic power poured in, it was absorbed and divided by the magic circuit, disappearing like mud and stone in the sea. But the rusted sword itself was trembling violently. Of course, this was no longer an amiable reaction. Looks like it's hated. Dake smiled. This was expected. A divine artifact sleeping in a treasure chest, waiting for the fated person to wake it up. Such a scene was not rare. It could only be said that he was not the fated person. As for whether this rusted sword was one of the legendary holy swords, he did not care too much. Dilu beast. Meow. At the top of the cat tree, the Dilu beast was holding its chin and thinking about how to use the little red flower. When it heard the call, it took the opportunity to jump. Its hands were like pinching the hem of its skirt, its legs crossed, and it landed lightly. Dake looked at the Duru beast lady and pointed at the rusted sword. Have you learned how to use magic? Give it a try. If it's just a normal release. The Dilu beast slowly walked over. Through the stimulation of armed, he could passively grasp the perception and movement of magic power. The Diru beast's learning speed was still at the forefront of the magic guide fairies. It came to the rusted sword, stretched out its claws, grabbed the hilt of the rusted sword, and then released magic power. As a result, the magic power of the magic elf's life was gradually drained away. However, Paradise's mechanism slowly filled this gap. Dake asked expectantly, "Do you feel anything?" The Dilu beast frowned and said, "Some." As it said that, the rusted sword that had swallowed Dake's magic power but still rejected it suddenly lit up with white light. The white light began to come out from the inside of the rusted sword, making the whole blade gradually become transparent, as if it was a sword-shaped luminous body. The rust on the surface of the sword was gradually falling off under the illumination of the white light. Shocking! Seeing that the situation was gradually developing beyond expectations, Dake couldn't help but show a surprised expression. The magic guide fairies that were squatting or sitting on the side were also very curious. Especially the little devil that had obtained the rusted sword. It kept flapping its wings. Was it envy, jealousy, or hatred? The little devil only hated the heavens for being unfair. It was obviously the sword that had obtained it, So why did it react to this stinky cat? The Dilu beast had completely immersed itself in the magic power interaction. As the rust on the rusted sword completely fell off, its full appearance was thus exposed. The hilt was exquisite like an ornament, and the ring at the end of the hilt was engraved with some kind of flower pattern. Although the blade was short, it was bright and clear, without the slightest scratch. The Dilu beast's thoughts moved slightly during the process of perception. It stretched out a finger and clasped the ring at the end of the hilt. Then, it pulled out a slender silver steel wire. This steel wire was very long, and once it was released, it would shrink back. If it was controlled with magic power, it could be used more freely. Just this setting alone caused the dagger's attack range and attack method to undergo a drastic change. Whether it was temporarily used as a throwing object, as a meteor hammer, or as a hardened steel wire to be used as a spear, it was all feasible. The Dilu beast let go of the ring and held the hilt again. It gestured in the air twice and suddenly said, "It's very smooth." "Of course it's smooth. Didn't you see the white light on the sword climbing up your arm?" Jealousy +1. At this time, Dake really wanted to find White to confirm whether this sword was one of the legendary holy swords. If it was, then it meant that the Dilu beast could also use it and had the qualifications of a hero. It was one of the candidates for this generation's hero. What the hell is this? Dake found that his mind was a bit chaotic. He patted his head and calmed himself down. According to his original plan, if this rusted sword was useless to him, then he would find a way to find more suitable materials to try to refine a magic guide spirit called the single scabbard. Since this rusted sword rejected him, then he would refine it into a magic guide spirit. Then it wouldn't reject him anymore, right? In short, Dake's idea was very feasible. But the current situation made him hesitate. The Dilu beast could actually use it. Wait. Dake patted his head and an idea popped up in his mind. Even if it can be used, if it can be refined into a single scabbard, wouldn't it be more convenient to use? After all, who doesn't want a sword that can move by itself? At that time, I can even step on the single scabbard and fly on the sword, pretending to be a sword immortal. When the Dilu beast was trying to familiarize himself with the rusted sword, short sword, he didn't expect that Dake was planning to refine this holy sword that belonged to him into a magic guide spirit that everyone could use. This kind of private behavior was really vicious, meow. However, Dake only had this idea. If he wanted to refine this kind of self-conscious weapon, he would need to use auxiliary materials and consume an unprecedented amount of magic power. Dake didn't have much confidence in his current magic power. He needed more time to settle down. Of course, if he really wanted to use it to refine a weapon, he had another method, and that was to shatter the dagger. As long as it was broken, it would change from a self-conscious weapon to a pure precious material. Then, the consumption of magic power would be greatly reduced. But in that case, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to refine the single scabbard. Although the single scabbard looked like a sword, it was actually a dual attribute spirit of steel plus ghost. If he lacked the ghost element, it would be very difficult to refine it successfully. In addition, after the single scabbard evolved into double scabbard and shield sword monster, it would have a shield. So, if he wanted to refine the single scabbard, he still needed the shield element. Speaking of shield, Dake couldn't help but glance at Meow Meow's direction, but he quickly withdrew his gaze. Now that I think about it, it seems that I already have the core requirements to refine the single scabbard. If it's still not enough, that piece of living metal might be able to make up for the lack. He suddenly realized that he was only a threshold of insufficient magic power before he could refine the single scabbard. And insufficient magic power could be made up for in many ways. For example, the most common magic potion, or something more efficient. Unfortunately, the big milk jar's milk was essentially life recovery, not magic power recovery. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to worry about insufficient magic power. Then the final question was, which great sin should he use as a guide? Dake considered the feasibility of refining the single scabbard, while he took out the Diru Beast magic card to check. After infusing a bit of magic power, he realized that the attributes of the Diru Beast holding the short sword had indeed increased greatly. The Diru Beast's basic attack was 1900, and with the Holy Ring as buff, it could maintain its normal attack at 2400. And with the short sword, it directly increased by 1200 points. This number, the two-headed demon's giant axe, can only provide 1000 points of attack, but this short sword can provide 1200 points of attack, and it doesn't seem to have any side effects. 1200 points. Could it be 4 by 300? Like Anna's Bear Strength, it's calculated according to the star rating X300? If it's really a holy sword, the possibility of this calculation is quite high. Let me see, other than the pure attack increase, what other abilities does it have? It has 2 additional passive abilities. One is Holy, the other is Holy Sword. Holy. On the basis of the original attribute restriction, the restriction against the demon race is increased by 100%, the restriction against the dark attribute is increased by 50%, and there is an additional lethal effect against the demon race. Holy Sword. When attacking, ignore the opponent's ability changes, it will definitely hit, and there is a small chance of ignoring defense to attack directly. Looks like it's really a holy sword. These 2 passive attributes really do have the feel of a holy sword. If I remember correctly, the single scabbard also has the Holy Sword ability. Although the effect is slightly different, it's inexplicably compatible. Dake looked at the passive ability called Holy Sword, and the more he looked, the more he felt that this Holy Sword and the single scabbard were fated. Maybe he could just casually refine it and successfully refine it. And as a light attribute Holy Sword, the great sin used must be pride. Just like when he refined Meow Meow with the basic refining method as the main axis and adding Holy Sword, Shield Turtle Jade, and Pride, he might be able to refine it. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this possibility was very high. If he had an efficient way to replenish his magic power, he might have started experimenting on the spot. But fortunately, he didn't have the ability to do so, so he finally calmed down. No rush, no rush. Tomorrow, I'll go to the catgrass flower shop to ask about the lion grass, and then see if there's any way to quickly replenish a large amount of magic power. Now, there are other things that I need to pay attention to. Dake returned to the desk and sat down, turning his gaze to the black crystal with 18 sides on the table. AI Ma's casual glance at the 18-sided crystal reminded him, and he finally remembered where he had seen this 18-sided object. Just as AI Ma said, it was a die. The 18-sided drinking order die. As a die used for drinking and entertainment during the Western Han Dynasty, although it wasn't very famous, it did exist. If I use this as a template, is it possible for me to refine it into a die with 18 different effects? Using this as a starting point, I might be able to make some breakthroughs in my thinking. If I exclude light and darkness, the magic elf has exactly 18 attributes. It's just that I don't know much about item card refining, unless I make it into a type of armor. In any case, he had a rough idea of how to deal with this 18-sided crystal. After Dake recorded his thoughts, he turned to pick up the piece of living metal. Even among all the gains today, this piece of living metal still exuded a strong sense of existence. It didn't have a hard outer shell like ordinary metals, which could be deformed with just a little bit of force, but it would slowly return to its original shape when placed in place. It felt like a memory metal. Dake's initial idea was to refine it into an armor, but in fact, he didn't think about what to refine. This was indeed a difficult problem for him. The scope of application of living metal was actually quite wide. Dake occasionally thought that if he made it into a character figurine, and then used the method of refining marionettes to process it, would he be able to get the legendary moving figurine. But that would be too wasteful. If he wasted such a large piece of rare metal for his own preferences, he would definitely not be able to sleep. But speaking of figurines, Dake stared at the piece of living metal for a long time. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. In his memory, there was something very similar to figurines, and there was no doubt that it belonged to the type of armor. It also used the system of soul power. But the essence of that thing was actually the inheritance of the soul. It was impossible to refine it with just a piece of metal. I have to think about it at length. As he pondered, the night gradually deepened. Dake gradually had some bold ideas. 2 in 1 4,000. I only slept for 3 hours after coding in the morning. I'm so sleepy. The new year is so troublesome. I'm so tired. Continue to ask for more monthly votes to get on the leaderboard. I still need 600 votes. Go, go, go. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.